Hi, and welcome to this Blockchain and Bitcoin Fundamentals course, where you will learn how blockchain technology and Bitcoin work, as well as how you can get started using Bitcoin. I'm George Levy, and I will be your instructor. I began my professional career in 1998 as a co-founder for an internet startup that was acquired by Microsoft, where I became a regional manager. I was then recruited by the World Business Forum to become a vice president and lead their digital efforts. I had the great opportunity to work with many of the world's leading minds in business and global politics. I am currently a lecturer and an instructor on blockchain, Bitcoin, and cryptocurrencies at Blockchain Institute of Technology. We will begin the course with a description of what is a blockchain. We'll follow that up with what is Bitcoin. We'll then dive in some key concepts in Bitcoin to explore further what Bitcoin is all about. We'll then go back and talk about the value of blockchain, followed by some common misconceptions about both Bitcoin and blockchain. And if you've never worked with Bitcoin, we'll complete with a section exactly on how you can get started with Bitcoin. Let's do this. When was the last time you bought a brand name item, like a luxury watch, or maybe a pair of sunglasses? How could you tell that that watch or those glasses was genuine and that it wasn't a knockoff? Or say you want to make a multi-million-dollar investment in a work of art, say a painting or maybe a sculpture. How can you tell that that painting or sculpture was actually made by the artist that they're claiming that it was made, or that it wasn't stolen? Being able to have accurate information about the provenance and the history of any item of value is essential. But in a world where we're dealing with malware, you're dealing with hackers, you're dealing with all sorts of counterfeit goods being put into supply chains all over the world, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to prove the authenticity and guarantee the integrity of any item of value that you're buying. There's an answer. And it's a technology called blockchain, because blockchain can provide you a single source of truth that's permanent, verifiable, and unchangeable. And that is what this course is all about. What is a blockchain? Let's look at a definition of what a blockchain is. A blockchain is a constantly growing ledger that keeps a permanent record of all the transactions that have taken place in a secure, chronological, an immutable way.
Let's take a look at that definition and break it down into its individual components. For starters, a blockchain is a ledger. That's all it really is. It's a ledger. And that ledger is constantly growing. What you see here is actually the size of the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, as you see this, it's actually growing from left to right. You see how it's been growing over time. As of the time I'm recording this lesson, the Bitcoin blockchain is over 200 gigabytes in size. Now, within that ledger that's constantly growing is a permanent record of all the transactions that have ever taken place on Bitcoin. What you see here is the first Bitcoin transaction ever. I'm able to see this because what you're seeing is a screenshot from what is known as a block explorer. And you will learn more about block explorers as we go through, because every single transaction that's ever taken place on Bitcoin is visible for you to see. The Bitcoin blockchain is a public blockchain, and you can see every single transaction that's ever taken place. In fact, what you're seeing here as this first Bitcoin transaction is a transaction that actually has a message inside. That message was placed there by Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin. And that message actually matches the cover of the Times for that day. The message says, "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." And it clearly states that the date is January 3rd, 2009, which was the day that the first block was ever created on the Bitcoin blockchain. That information is kept in a very secure manner because there's thousands of copies of that same blockchain all around the world. What you're seeing here is a map of all the thousands of computers around the world that are currently keeping a copy of that Bitcoin blockchain. That is, there's not just one blockchain that you can hack and destroy. It's actually distributed, and there are thousands of copies all around the world for it. Furthermore, that information is preserved using highly advanced cryptography. all the information that's captured in that blockchain is captured in a chronological manner. And you'll understand why this is so important as we go through this course. That means that every block that gets added to the Bitcoin blockchain is added as a new block and chronologically ordered. As you can see, the numbers are growing as new blocks are added. Finally, all the information that's recorded on that Bitcoin blockchain is immutable. That is, nobody can change it once it's actually recorded inside. What you are seeing here is a transaction recorded on block number 501,497, dated December 29th, 2017. And in that transaction, I wrote my own message. We are changing the world, one blockchain at a time.
Hi, it's George Levy. I want to take a quick moment to check in on you to see how you're enjoying the course. I hope by this point you've been actually gathering new information from me and that you're learning from all the lessons that I'm presenting you. It's very important for me to know that you are learning, so if there's any way that I can actually make the course better, I would love to hear from you, so please message me directly. While I'm here, I want to also let you know that Udemy has recently implemented a new way to collect reviews from users earlier and earlier in the course. I wanted to make you aware because at some point very soon, Udemy will ask you to leave a review for this course. When they do, I encourage you to please leave an honest review for the course. Your reviews are extremely important to the success of this course and to the integrity of all the courses on Udemy. So please, when Udemy asks you for a review, please do so. And remember, if there's anything that I can do to actually make the course better, please contact me directly. It is very important for me to deliver you the best possible course. Now, I don't want to take away any more of your time. We have a lot of work to do. We're changing the world, one blockchain at a time. You may have heard about Bitcoin. In case you haven't, a Bitcoin is a type of digital asset that can be bought, sold, or transferred between parties securely over the internet. Because of this, Bitcoin can be used to store value, much like buying gold, silver, and other types of investments. But unlike those other types of investments, Bitcoin also serves as a form of digital currency, and you can use it to buy products and services as well as make payments and exchange value electronically. However, different from other types of traditional currency, such as dollars or euros, which you can also use to buy things and exchange value electronically, there are no physical coins for Bitcoin or paper bills. And when you send Bitcoin to someone or use Bitcoin to buy anything, you don't need to use a bank, a credit card, or any other third-party type of clearinghouse. Instead, you simply send Bitcoin directly to another party over the internet and it will arrive securely and almost instantly. Whenever you send an email to another person, you simply type in their email address and you communicate directly with that person. It's the same thing when you send an instant message. This type of communication between two parties is commonly called peer-to-peer, and it's how people communicate every day over the web. You can send photos, videos, and other types of files easily and quickly over the web. However, whenever you want to send money to someone over the internet, you need to enlist the services of a third party, such as a bank, a credit card, PayPal, or some other type of money transfer service. You can't simply just attach some money to an email and send it to someone like you would send a photo or some other document. Why is that? The reason is that whenever you do a transfer of value between two parties, you need to ensure that a real transfer has taken place. In other words, you need to be able to verify that both parties have done what they need to do in a real exchange. For example, if I send a photo I like to another person, I can simply attach that photo to an email and send it. The other person will receive the photo, and that's where you think it would end. But not quite. We now have two copies of the photo, the one I sent by email and the original file, which is still in my computer. What I really did was email a copy of the file with the photo, not the original file. This issue is commonly known as the double spend problem, and what we currently have a need for banks and other types of institutions to act as middlemen in these types of transactions. Without these intermediaries, people could simply try to copy and paste money, and it would be impossible to determine if a transaction is real or not. But if the double spend problem presents such a challenge, how is it that you can send Bitcoin to someone else over the internet without needing a bank or some other institution to certify that a transfer took place? The answer lies in a global network of thousands of computers called the Bitcoin network, and a special type of decentralized ledger technology called blockchain. Blockchain is one of the key technologies that underlies Bitcoin, as it keeps a decentralized record of all the transactions that have ever taken place on the Bitcoin network. All the information is captured securely by using math and cryptography to protect it, and the data is stored and verified across the entire network of computers. In other words, instead of having a centralized database at a third party such as a bank to certify that a transaction took place, Bitcoin uses blockchain technology across a wide, decentralized network of computers to securely verify, confirm, and record each transaction. Because the data is stored in a decentralized manner across a wide network instead of a centralized database, there is no single point of failure. This makes the records which are stored on blockchain more secure and less prone to fraud, tampering, or a general system failure than keeping them in a single centralized location. Within the Bitcoin network, there are a group of people which are called miners. And miners, their role is to process and confirm transactions. Anybody can apply to be a miner and you could run the client yourself. However, typically these miners use very powerful computers that are specifically designed to mine Bitcoin transactions. And the way they do that is by actually solving math problems and resolving cryptography issues. Because every one of these transactions needs to be cryptographically encoded and secured. And these mathematical problems are what actually ensures that nobody's tampering with that data. Additionally, for this task, the miners are paid in Bitcoin, which is a key component of Bitcoin, because money in Bitcoin is not created like you create normal fiat currency. And by fiat currency, I mean currency that's the backing of a country. Like, for example, the United States has dollars, Japan has yen, the yuan comes from China. All of those are actually created by central banks. Bitcoin is not. The way that Bitcoin is created is by rewarding these miners for their work in solving these math and cryptography problems. Now that you're familiar with the concept of Bitcoin miners and what their role is, let's apply it to the definition of the Bitcoin blockchain. So when you really think it through, what the role of the miners is to build the blockchain of records that forms the Bitcoin ledger. And these are blocks, and each block contains all the different transactions that have taken place. New blocks are added every 10 minutes with all the new transactions. So as the miners are processing these different transactions, they build a block, and when a block is confirmed, it gets added to the blockchain. This blockchain is built all the way back to the initial transaction ever in Bitcoin, which is regarded as the Genesis block.
Now that you're familiar with the role of miners and how they mine blocks to be able to generate and create the blockchain for Bitcoin, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about cryptography, because Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, and in cryptocurrency, cryptography is a key component. So I'm going to talk to you specifically about something called a hash function. And for this hash function, I'm going to be using a program that is made available for you by Blockchain Institute of Technology at demoblockchain.org/hash. What this program is a hash generator. So let me explain to you what a cryptographic hash is. A cryptographic hash is basically a digest or a digital fingerprint of a certain amount of data. What do I mean by that? It is an amount of data alphanumerically in a certain length. So if I were to type in here anything, I go, this is a great program, you will see that with every single character as we build it out, you have a cryptographic hash equivalent down here. So this is a SHA-256 hash of this text here. And if I add anything, say one character, you get a completely different hash from it. Let me explain to you a little bit what SHA-256 stands for. SHA stands for Secure Hash Algorithm, and the SHA-256 hash algorithm was developed by the NSA, the National Security Agency. And this entire program is a hash generator that we're using right now. SHA-256 is the type of hash function that is used in Bitcoin, and I will go further into detail in subsequent lessons in this course. But I wanted to start here to explain to you what makes a SHA-256 or any hash function so fascinating. What it allows you to do is that you will always be able to generate a hash from a certain amount of data. So right now what I'm going to do is I am pasting the entire works of Moby Dick. There's 1,047 pages, and you have an equivalent hash for this. Now if I go to a separate window using another SHA-256 hash, the same program but with a clear window, and I were to paste the entire works of Moby Dick, what you will find is that the hash that you generate from these, this is one window, this is the other window, is always the same. Why? Because you are creating a message digest of that one specific amount of data right here. Now what's interesting about hashes is that hashes are one-way functions. What this means is that you can generate a hash from this entire text and you will have this at the bottom. But there's no way whatsoever to go back to the original text. In other ways, there is no way for you to get this entire text from this one hash down here. This is different from what would be traditionally called encryption, which when you encrypt something, you can, using the right key, decrypt that message and retrieve the original. But with a hash, you do not. A hash generates a unique fingerprint that cannot be reversed back to the original amount. It is a one-way directional. Now that you're familiar with the concept of cryptographic hash functions and we spoke about SHA-256, let's see how it applies into building a block within a blockchain. And we're going to be talking specifically in the context of a Bitcoin blockchain so you understand how this ties into the role of the miners. So the miners are actually in the process of building blocks, and these blocks are added to a blockchain to build out what a blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain would be. What you're seeing here is that this block is composed of a block number. It has a field called data. It has a cryptographic hash associated with it. And you have what's called a nonce. And I will explain this in detail now. For the moment, I'd like to point out that this hash has 4 leading zeros. These 4 leading zeros will come in handy when I talk to you in the next lesson because it describes when a block is valid or not. For practical purposes, what you will see is that this hash corresponding to this nonce and this block and whatever amount of data is here has 4 leading zeros. Therefore, it is a valid block. But if I were to make any change here, for example, by adding a single character, you get a completely different hash. As we explained, a cryptographic hash is basically a digest of whatever information you're compressing into that one hash. So when we do a cryptographic hash for this block, including this extra character of an A in it, you're getting a completely different cryptographic hash. And this one no longer has 4 leading zeros. Therefore, it is not valid. For this purpose, what we need to do is figure out a way to make this block work. And the way we will do that is by using this field called a nonce. Nonce stands for number used once, and it's basically a random number that is used for figuring out how you can actually make this specific block give you a valid hash, in this case having four zeros at the beginning. So the way that you could do this is you could do it manually. You could have 1. Well, that gives you a different hash, but that doesn't work. Let's try a different one. That doesn't work either. Let's try 3. Nope. You could go on here, on and on and on, or what you could do is mine it. And in this case, what you're doing is you're putting a computer to actually figure out what is the correct nonce that will give you a hash that will have those 4 zeros at the beginning. And we found it. It would be 71,850. Now, what's interesting about this whole process is that if you were to change anything in this, for example, try a different block number, you would have a completely different cryptographic hash. So it would not work. You always would have to get this combination to be able to get those 4 leading zeros, so you get the correct appropriate hash for it. But if you did any changes to it, you would again get a completely different cryptographic hash, and the block would no longer be valid. So that is where the whole concept of how cryptography ties into assembling a block and making sure that a block is valid within a blockchain. I will explain further in the following lesson. Now that you know how blocks are assembled and how cryptographic hashing ties into the whole process, I'm going to string together a series of blocks so you can see how blockchain uses all these concepts together to preserve the integrity of a full blockchain. And what you'll find is that using this demo, you will find that blocks are assembled chronologically. Block number 1 is followed by block number 2, then block number 3, then block number 4, block number 5, and you could continue as long as you wish. The point is that there are some elements that are common in every one of them. As we spoke in the previous video lesson, the block has a block number, it has a certain amount of data, and it also has a hash associated with it. But what you'll find in this example is that there is another field, and that field is this one, and it includes something that says prev, or in this case it would be previous. What you'll see is that this field is actually corresponding to the hash that's included in the previous block. So, and this is where the sheer elegance of blockchain ties in. Every block in a blockchain is cryptographically tied. So as you see, these blocks are tied together. Block number 1 has a block number, it has a certain amount of data, it has a cryptographic hash associated with it. This one, because it's block 1, doesn't have any previous hash, therefore the value is 0. But in block number 2, what you find is that it has to do the hash related to the hash in the previous block. And if you go to block number 3, you will find that block number 3 is making reference to the hash from block number 2. And if you go to block number 4, it makes reference to the hash in block number 3. And that you could continue all the way to the front of the chain. Now this is where blockchain is such a brilliant invention. If you were to change any block, any amount of data within any of these blocks, say for example block number 2, I were to add a single character, you no longer just break block number 2 because the hash is no longer valid, but it also invalidates every single block that's in front of it. And this is what I love about blockchain. It's so simple that it basically works like a domino effect. If you break a block, it simply tears down the whole structure to the front. Now, if I were to try to fix this, the only way that I could do that would be by figuring out a nonce that would work there, as we explained before. So I could go simply 1 block and try that. Well, that one doesn't give me a valid hash. Let's try 2. Let's try 3. Let's try 5. None of that will work. Or I can simply mine it. When you mine a block, the system figures out that here is a valid hash. It's got 4 leading zeros, which we said was the importance of this. But as you'll notice, when you try to hash block number 3, this hash doesn't have 4 leading zeros, therefore it's still an invalid block. So you have to mine this block as well. And you would have to do that with every single block all the way to the front of the chain to be able to fix what happened here. Now let's talk about the key concepts that we spoke about. We spoke about how important it is to have 4 leading zeros. These 4 leading zeros are tied to something called difficulty level. And the difficulty level is something that's tied and built into the blockchain network, which determines how difficult it is for you to be able to get the equivalent cryptographic hash for a block. In this case, the difficulty level requires us to have a hash that is smaller than what we have in the target. And for this specific purpose, we would need a target that has at least 4 leading zeros. Now the difficulty level keeps increasing over time as new computers are added and more cryptographic hashing is added to the Bitcoin network. So more hashing power means that the difficulty level needs to go up. And that difficulty level is adjusted every 2 weeks to make sure that the computers that are actually competing to try to solve these cryptographic problems take approximately a total of 10 minutes to mine a new block. So what we've got here is that as these computers are trying to race to compete for the chance to actually be rewarded and put the next block on the blockchain, what they're really doing is figuring out the required nonce to come up with a cryptographic hash that will be less than the required target for the difficulty level. So let's see how this ties into security. If anybody were to try to tamper with any block, as we said, let's try to tamper with block number 3 and make any change to it, you would break not only block number 3, but you break every single block above it, block number 4, block number 5, all the way to the front of the chain. Now, if anybody were to try to do that type of an attack, they would need to not only mine this specific block, and as I mentioned, every other block that's in front of it, but they would have to be able to do that faster than the rest of the network. So they would need to have at least 51% of the hashing power in the network to be able to validate the new blockchain that they would have to create with their modified changes. And this would all have to be done in less than 10 minutes because, as we said, new blocks are mined every 10 minutes. And that is how the sheer elegance of a blockchain, making it so easy to make it visually accessible that somebody has tampered with any block, makes it so incredibly powerful. In this video, I am going to be presenting how a distributed blockchain works. Because Bitcoin actually has thousands of copies of the same exact blockchain distributed across thousands of full nodes across the Bitcoin network. We will be focusing on multiple copies of a blockchain. So as you can see, we have a peer A, we have a peer B, we have a peer C. In the case of Bitcoin, there will be thousands of copies of the blockchain. For the purposes of this demo, we have that there's a chain of blocks. There's block number 1, followed by block number 2, then block number 3, then block number 4, then block number 5. Each one of the blocks has a block number. Additionally, there's a data field, and this would be all the data that would be included in this block. In the case of Bitcoin, it would be however many hundreds or thousands of transactions there would be in the block, but it's the data contained in the block. We have a corresponding SHA-256 hash for this block. A block in Bitcoin needs to have a corresponding hash that's below a certain target level. In this case, it's determined by a number of certain leading zeros at the start of the hash. As we can see in this specific example, we find that all of these blocks have hashes at the bottom that all start with at least 4 zeros. So what we find also is that this chain of blocks that we're seeing here, every block is linked to the following block. And what I mean by that is block number 3 has a corresponding hash that begins with 4 leading zeros, and in this case ends in 140BF. But what we find is that there is a field called prev, which has the actual hash corresponding to the previous block. And what we find is that we have a chain of blocks because block number 2 has a corresponding hash, which is carried along into block number 3 in the previous field. You see this hash is the same exact hash that you have down here. And then this one specific block has its own hash, and that hash is actually carried over to block number 4 as the previous hash. So what we have is a chain of blocks that are linked together by the corresponding hashes on the bottom. Now furthermore, because we're talking about distributed blockchains, we have multiple copies of this blockchain. So we have a blockchain that's held by peer A, we have peer B, we have peer C. In the case of Bitcoin, there would be thousands of copies of this blockchain because the Bitcoin network has thousands of full nodes that have each an exact copy of the blockchain. And what you'll find is that block number 2, which is in peer A, is the same exact as block number 2 in peer B, same exact as block number 2 in peer C, same going all the way to block number 5. Let's go all the way to block number 5. And there's a reason why I'm telling you this, because each one of these blocks is identical and you have a corresponding cryptographic hash. In the case of block number 5, that hash ends in D217C. This block 5 has D217C, and this block 5 has D217C. But let's assume that one of the nodes, in this case let's just take peer B, decided to change a block and wanted to add an extra transaction or modify the contents of the block. If that miner were to make a change, automatically the corresponding hash for that block would break. And in the process, the entire blockchain would break. Why? Because this block would no longer have 4 leading zeros. And as a result, it would not be valid in the Bitcoin network. And because this has no 4 leading zeros, it would also change block number 4, and it would break block number 5 because each one is cryptographically tied to the previous one. Now, even if this miner were to try to mine this block, to try to make it back so it would be valid according to the Bitcoin blockchain requirements, and have a corresponding hash with a leading number of zeros, in this case 4 leading zeros, Even though this block would still be valid again, it still would not fit with the rest of the blockchain. You would also see that the rest of the network would still have an identical copy of the blockchain that would not match this broken chain. So in this case, this one specific miner veering off and breaking off the blockchain would have no impact whatsoever on the rest of the network, because the rest of the network would have an identical copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. And even if this miner were to continue trying to mine his way to the front and remine each block, trying to create a new block of transactions and have the corresponding numbers of zeros, you would still find that the cryptographic hash for his block number 5 would not match the cryptographic hashes for the other nodes. Because of this, the rest of the Bitcoin network will reject this version of the blockchain because the cryptographic hashes do not match. We have covered a lot of ground in this course. I would like now to start tying it all together by identifying 4 components within Bitcoin and how it ties everything together to make Bitcoin possible. So the 4 components that I will be identifying are, number 1, software. Bitcoin is at its core software. It's basically a software that defines what a Bitcoin is, as well as how a Bitcoin gets transferred. It identifies what are the rules of a valid Bitcoin. It identifies who can be inside Bitcoin, who cannot be inside Bitcoin, what is valid, what is not, etc. Everything is based on a software, which is the Bitcoin software. That software at its core uses cryptography. And Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. And as a cryptocurrency, it uses cryptography to regulate the transfer of Bitcoin between parties, as well as the creation of new units of Bitcoin. So if it wasn't for cryptography, Bitcoin would simply not be possible. We have so far the software, and we've got that this software uses cryptography to control the transfer of Bitcoin, as well as regulating the creation of new units of Bitcoin, but it needs to run on hardware. This hardware is what's composed of those thousands of miners around the world running their computers. So there's thousands of computers around the world that are basically running the Bitcoin software, or the Bitcoin client rather. It's the same thing. So the point is, all of this software is running on a network of thousands of computers around the world, which form this hardware component that we're talking about. But the final piece that ties it all together is the fact that at the core of Bitcoin, what makes Bitcoin possible is gaming theory. Because Bitcoin, in essence, is truly a game that is run by these miners around the world. And I'll tell you exactly how this all ties in a diagram. As we stated, the first component is software. The software for Bitcoin, every 10 minutes, issues a cryptography challenge. As we showed in a previous demo lesson, this cryptography challenge involves trying to find a nonce which will make the hash for a specific block be valid. So it needs to be under a certain number. There needs to be a certain number of leading zeros in order for you to be able to have a valid block. So that is the challenge that is issued by the Bitcoin software approximately every 10 minutes as a new block of transactions needs to be mined. So as this challenge gets issued, the miners are involved. These miners are running their hardware. They basically have these thousands of mining computers around the world that are running the Bitcoin software. When the challenge is issued, there is a game that begins. And there's a race that goes off. And the race involves all of these miners competing against each other, trying to find the solution to that one nonce that will satisfy that hash for the block. As we stated, it's a matter of simply random guessing, number after number after number after number, and billions and trillions of combinations, trying to find the exact combination that will get you the specific nonce that will satisfy the hash for that block. At some specific point, one of those miners in the global community will solve the cryptography challenge, and that will be the winner of that race. Now, the rest of the community at that point has a very important role, and that is to verify the validity that that new block is valid. And this is what makes Bitcoin so strong, because in one stage of this cycle, the miners are competing against each other. And in the next stage of this cycle, the rest of the community rallies together to ensure that that solution is correct. So they're basically collaborating to ensure that that solution is correct. So it's a competition and a co-opetition as they're helping each other to verify that every single transaction is valid. If in fact the nonce is correct, and that specific challenge is called proof of work. If the proof of work, which is actually proving that you were able to find the nonce for that specific cryptographic puzzle, the block is considered valid, and then it is added to the Bitcoin blockchain. This is how new blocks are added to the Bitcoin blockchain, and each block will include all the transactions that that specific miner has identified to be added into that block. For that task, the miner will earn a reward. That reward is currently 12.5 Bitcoins, and that is how new Bitcoins are created. In this video, I'm going to be explaining to you what the Coinbase transaction is. And to do that, I want to take you to a block explorer. A block explorer is a tool that lets you look at a blockchain and whatever is contained inside it. In this case, we're going to be looking at a Bitcoin block explorer, which is found at btc.com. Now, as you can see on btc.com, we have a list of the latest blocks. These are all the blocks that have been created and added to the Bitcoin blockchain. In fact, inside this block explorer, you can look up information for every single block ever created, right down to the first Bitcoin blockchain block, the Genesis block, which would have been block number 0. But for the purposes of this specific example, I want to take you to the latest block. As you can see, the latest block created at the time of this recording is number 562,034. Let's look at some of the information we can see here. We can see who mined this block. In this case, it's a mining pool called Via BTC. You can see the size of that block. You can see the reward that those miners receive. You can see how long ago that block was created. And you can see the corresponding block hash. Now, you can see that all the other blocks also have the same type of information. Who mined that block? What is the size of it? What is the reward they received? How long ago it was created? You can see the block hash for that. So let's go right now to that specific latest block, and let's look at some more information inside it. So as we go into that block, what you can see is not only the height for that block, but you can see the number of transactions. There were 227 transactions in that one block. Now, here's what's interesting about this. You can find in here that even though there's all these transactions inside, actually to be specific, 227 of them, the first transaction is labeled as a Coinbase transaction. And that's very important because every single block on the Bitcoin blockchain has the Coinbase transaction. That Coinbase transaction is a very important one because it's exactly where the miner receives the reward for creating that block. The Coinbase transaction gives that miner the permission to reward him or herself, or if it's a mining pool, the mining pool, 12.5 new Bitcoins. This is how new Bitcoins are created on Bitcoin. You see, dollars are printed and people can just go and run the printing press and print a lot of dollars. But in the case of Bitcoin, new Bitcoins are created through Bitcoin mining. In the mining process, all these miners put together blocks, and in every block they include as the first transaction what is known as the Coinbase transaction. That's what we're looking at right here. You will see that in this Coinbase transaction, that miner received 12.50633026 Bitcoins. Now, it's a very interesting thing for you to say because if the mining rewards at this specific moment are 12.5 Bitcoins, how come it's more than 12.5 Bitcoins? And the answer is because that miner not only receives 12.5 new Bitcoins with every block they create, but they also receive all of the transaction fees which are included in all the transactions that they have included in that one block. So what's interesting is that via BTC, by creating this new block and being able to successfully add it to the Bitcoin blockchain, they received 12.5 brand new Bitcoins in this Coinbase transaction, but they also were able to reward themselves by adding all of the transaction fees from all the other transactions that they had included in this one specific block. We've covered a lot of ground in this course, but now we're going to have some fun. Let's go on a field trip and actually look at the Bitcoin network at work so you can actually see how all the concepts we've been looking at actually work in reality. For doing this, we're going to be using a block explorer. A block explorer is a type of tool that enables you to see the Bitcoin blockchain or whichever blockchain you're looking at. For instance, right now, you're looking at a block explorer found at blockchain.com/explorer. What you'll find is that this block explorer not only lets you look at Bitcoin, it lets you look at other blockchains, Ethereum, here's Bitcoin Cash, and there are other block explorers for different blockchains. For the purposes of this course, we're focusing on blockchain and Bitcoin, so let's drill down on Bitcoin. Key things I want to point out to you about this is that Bitcoin is a public blockchain. As a public blockchain, that means that the information that's recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain is available for everyone to see. That's why we will now be able to use this block explorer to look into the Bitcoin blockchain. Key thing I want to point out to you is that while we're looking at this information on the blockchain.com block explorer, you will also be able to see other block explorers. For instance, this is btc.com, which also has a block explorer. And you'll find that right now btc.com is listing the latest block as block number 574,143. That's 574,142, 574,141. You see they're chronologically ordered. And you find that you see here who the different miners are. This was mined by a mining pool called dpool. This was mined by a mining pool called antpool. This was mined by btc.com. This was mined by dpool, etc. And if we go back to blockchain.com/explorer, you will find the same thing. The latest block is 574,143, same one that we had here, and so on and so forth. You will find that the miners are the same ones that are listed here, etc. We're looking at the same exact information. Now let me point out some key things while we're here. What's interesting about this is that the block explorer will let you know every single transaction that's been inside the Bitcoin blockchain all the way back to the first Bitcoin block on the Bitcoin blockchain. So that's the Genesis block. So if right now I were to go to say the Bitcoin mainnet and I go here 0, I'll be able to do a search and it will take me back to block height 0. This is the first block ever. Right? And you see here, this is the first block. It's got its own block hash. And the previous block was 000 because there was no block before that, right? And this actually took place on January 3rd, 2009. Remember, we were talking about the fact that if you go inside here and you look at it, there's only one transaction. And if I go into that transaction, I will find that message we spoke about. The time 03 January 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. You see, all this information is recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain permanently and immutably. Let's go back again to the block explorer. And while I'm here, I'm going to show you some key things here because this is a really interesting site that you can focus on. You will find constantly updated information, for example, for the price of Bitcoin. Right now, this is an average across the major exchanges. That is because Bitcoin doesn't have one price. It depends on what somebody's willing to pay for a Bitcoin, and different exchanges have different prices for Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin's traded globally, sometimes you will find that Bitcoin is trading at a higher price in a certain country and it may be cheaper in another country, or you will find that even in the same country, different exchanges will have different prices for Bitcoin. So there's a variation. What you have here is the average market price when you go across the major exchanges. You have other information such as the hash rate. This is the measurement of the network's processing power. That is, when you really look at it, I'm going to take you to btc.com for a moment. This is the hash rate, which is the processing power for these miners. So this mining pool has a hash rate of 7,827 petahashes per second. F2 pool has 5,883.36 petahashes per second. This is the hash rate. And as you can see, different miners have different hash rates. And as a result, some miners, when they have a lot more hash rate, are able to mine blocks more often than others. However, there are no guarantees that you will get all the blocks. So as we mentioned here, the number one in hash rate definitely is btc.com, and they've mined a lot of blocks, but not always, because it's a competition. And what you find is many of the other mining pools sometimes win as well. And btc.com is by no means always the winner. Often this moves around. Ant pool is sometimes the winner, F2 is the winner. You have different, because miners change hash rate. Miners join the network, miners leave the network, miners sometimes pull out of the Bitcoin network and actually start mining Bitcoin Cash, etc. There's many variables that will affect the hash rate for the Bitcoin network. Let's go back to blockchain.com/explorer. Key things I also want to point out to you here, because it's a very valuable site, is you can go specifically to, there's a tab called Data, and inside it you will find a link that says Charts. This is a price list page that I want you to go to, and I encourage you to follow along with everything I'm doing to see it for yourself, because once you're done with this field trip, you will know more about how to use Bitcoin and how to see information in Bitcoin than 90% of the people out there. If you can really master this lesson, you'll be able to truly know what Bitcoin's all about. So key things you'll see here, and this is constantly updated information because, as I mentioned, the Bitcoin blockchain is a public blockchain, and all this information, as it grows, blockchain.com constantly updates their charts. So key things you'll find here. Some of the popular stats, obviously the market price is one. The number of transactions per day is very important too. Another thing I want to point out to you is what's known as the mempool. The mempool, or memory pool, is the size of the number of transactions waiting to be confirmed. They define it as the aggregate size of transactions waiting to be confirmed. Let me show you what that means. This is the number of unconfirmed transactions. This is a live updating list. What you see is all the transactions that are coming into the Bitcoin network. Let me go one step further and refresh. What you find is that there are 175 transactions per second that are shown. My screen cannot show you 175 transactions per second being shown. In fact, what you're seeing here is my computer trying to catch up and keep up with it. There's just a massive number of transactions constantly coming into Bitcoin. And you can see every single one of these transactions. This one's 4 BTC. That was 21 Bitcoins. We're looking, these are 128 Bitcoins. There's some really, really large transactions that are constantly moving through the Bitcoin blockchain. And you can see it all happening here. Now, as the miners are creating new blocks, what they are doing is each mining group actually has a memory pool of their own in which they collect these unconfirmed transactions. And from these unconfirmed transactions, they start assembling blocks, and then they get into competition with the other miners, trying to see who will be able to create the latest block to add to the Bitcoin blockchain. So what you're seeing here is the live Bitcoin network working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as new transactions make it into the network. So let's do something right now. I'm going to go back now to the blockchain.com/explorer site. Let me go back here again. And what you will find is that you have here all the latest transactions. You see the number of transactions per block that are coming into these, but you can also drill down into individual transactions. And this is important because, say for example, you do a transaction with someone else and the other person says, no, that transaction never arrived. As long as you have the transaction, you can actually see if it's been confirmed and added to the Bitcoin blockchain. That is, there's no doubts. If in fact the transaction is confirmed, that means that it's already been added to the Bitcoin blockchain. Therefore, the transaction happened. Let's do that right now. If I go here and I'm going to look inside the Bitcoin mainnet, and I'm going to look for a specific transaction, I can paste a transaction number inside the Block Explorer and I can search for it. And the Block Explorer will look at the Bitcoin blockchain and it will find that transaction and give me back the results. What I find is that this transaction was actually received on December 29th, 2017, and it's definitely confirmed. In fact, there's been 72,648 blocks since then. You can see that because it was included in block 501,497. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this transaction with you is because I had already told you about this transaction, and it's a transaction where I hid a message inside. We are changing the world one blockchain at a time. And that transaction is recorded permanently and immutably. Now here's what's interesting. This happened on December 29th, 2017 in block 501,497. And yet, when I come back, you will find that we're currently at block 574,144. Interesting key point is that, as you will notice, there has been a new block created since we last looked at this page. This latest block has been created by Antpool, and it contains 3,139 transactions. That block was mined 4 minutes ago. Now, key things I want to point out to you from this whole perspective as well is that all of this is happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you ever have any questions about any specific transaction, you can simply do your search in here. And one key thing that I want you to do while you're at it is make sure to visit that link, blockchain.com/BTC/unconfirmed-transactions, because as you just heard, we just created a brand new block. And that's because from this group of unconfirmed transactions, a miner just created another brand new block. You see how that unconfirmed transactions number dropped from 8,000 to 5,000? And that's because we just got a brand new block. You got back-to-back blocks in the time that we actually looked at this little sample. So it's a really exciting thing that I encourage you to do, because this never stops. It goes on 24 hours a day. Actually, let's take a look at what just happened by going back to the Block Explorer. And let me just refresh, make sure I got the latest information. And I find that the latest block right now is mined by BTC.top, and it's block number 574,145 with 3,282 transactions. We just saw that happen. Let's go to BTC.com and see what they show. And if I go, that's correct. I see the same exact thing, 574, 145. And here's your reward. And this is the latest block. So again, go back to blockchain.com/BTC/unconfirmed-transactions and blockchain.com/explorer and do your own field trip on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Let's talk about a few key concepts in Bitcoin, as they will come up regularly in conversation. To do so, let's focus first on how money is sent over the internet. When we look at how you send money over the internet, we spoke that you need the services of a third party, such as a bank, a credit card, or some other institution to actually handle the whole transaction. And that's because it's impossible for you to simply take money, attach it to an email, and send it to someone else. There's simply no mechanism for doing that. One of the key reasons we set that is because we need to prevent what is called double spending. And that's because you need to certify that there was an actual transfer of value. If I have $100 and I tried to attach them to an email and send them to you, we would run into the risk of me just taking a copy of the $100 and sending them over to you. So there's really no way for you to take money, as we know money, and send it over the internet, because there's no way to transfer value like that. Because of that, you need to enlist the services of a third party. That third party controls the entire transfer. And as they control the transfer, they record the transaction. That's how they keep record that there was actual transfer of value. And that's usually kept in a centralized manner, which means your bank keeps a copy of the transaction in their databases. And if they're doing a transfer to another bank, then the other bank also keeps a record in their database. Those banks, each one of them controls that database in their own way. So it's centralized to the bank. This is different from how Bitcoin does things. When it comes to Bitcoin, there are 4 key concepts you need to be aware of. The first one is that when you send money to someone over the internet, you need a third party, as we specified. But when it comes to Bitcoin, you're doing that peer-to-peer, directly to another party over the internet. And instead of using the third party, the entire Bitcoin network takes that place. So the network takes care of confirming and verifying that there was a true transfer of value between the two parties. That concept is called being disintermediated, and you need to understand disintermediation, which is the act of removing the middleman. This concept of disintermediation is one of the key components that makes blockchain so valuable, because it eliminates much of the unnecessary inefficiency that's involved with having to use a third party when it comes to the transfer of value between parties. The next key concept you need to understand is that Bitcoin is distributed. And by distributed, what is meant is that the entire network runs on a network of thousands of distributed computers which are sharing the work. So instead of having one centralized computer that actually handles the brunt of the work, you're distributing it across multiple computers. By being distributed, it is more reliable because there's no single point of failure which you can take down. Instead, the work is shared across thousands of computers which are all running and sharing the workload. This leads us to the next key concept, which is the fact that Bitcoin is decentralized. Being decentralized means that there is no central control, no central repository of data, and no management in the middle that tells Bitcoin what to do. As a result, there's no central point of failure. Because Bitcoin is distributed, the work is shared across all these thousands of different computers running the Bitcoin client. But beyond that, it is decentralized, which means that if you were to take out any of these computers, it would make no difference because there is no centralized area of control. Bitcoin is decentralized. But being decentralized also means that there is no centralized authority overseeing what Bitcoin does. And when we look at it, for example, in Bitcoin being a currency, you could compare it to something like, say, a fiat currency like the US dollar, which has the Federal Reserve overseeing the supply of US dollars. The Federal Reserve, if it wants to increase the supply of dollars, it can simply just print more dollars. But in the case of Bitcoin, there is no overarching institution like, say, the Federal Reserve to tell Bitcoin what to do. It is truly decentralized because nothing tells Bitcoin what to do. And the final key concept you need to understand is that Bitcoin is trustless. And what's meant by trustless is that there is no need to have a third party, such as a bank, to certify and bring trust to the entire process of transactions. Instead, the blockchain and how Bitcoin processes transactions enables the trust. This is done by something called distributed trustless consensus, in which all the nodes agree that a transaction took place. As I explained, the Bitcoin blockchain goes all the way back to the very first transaction ever done on the Bitcoin network, which is normally regarded as the Genesis block. Some clients call that block 0, others call it block 1. Typically block 0 is more popular. But that transaction took place on January 3rd, 2009. So let's go back there and let's begin with where Bitcoin was born, as it'll help us understand why Bitcoin is even here. The world in 2008 looked very different from now. We were in the middle of a financial crisis. The banks had fallen under. There was a major bailout going out and a lot of crisis when it came to the uncertainty of where the economy was headed. In the middle of all that crisis, there was a white paper published on October 31st, 2008 by someone called Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. Some people say it might not even be one person. It might be a group of people operating under a pseudonym. But Satoshi Nakamoto put out a white paper on Bitcoin called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Knowing about this white paper is very important whenever you're having a conversation about blockchain or Bitcoin with anyone. And that's because it basically describes exactly what the whole premise of blockchain is. In fact, Satoshi Nakamoto states in the white paper, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. This was not possible before. And in fact, it describes exactly what disintermediation is all about. It's important to note that Bitcoin was not the first attempt at electronic cash. As a matter of fact, you can look back as far as 1976. There was another white paper published, New Directions in Cryptography, which spoke about mutual distributed ledgers, which basically was a precursor to what blockchains are. It's a single ledger distributed across multiple locations. We have other attempts as well. In 1983, we had eCash, we had Hashcash proof of work in 97, B-Money in 1997, and one that points out is BitGold, which was actually published by Nick Szabo, who is the father of what are known now as smart contracts, as far back as 1998. We'll talk more about smart contracts and Nick Szabo in future lessons. When we talk about blockchain, we need to talk about Bitcoin. And the reason is because Bitcoin is the best known application of blockchain technology. And a lot of the development that's going on in the blockchain space is based on what blockchain enables Bitcoin to do. So one of the key things I want to talk to you about right now is the value of blockchain. You may hear some people describe blockchain as the internet of value or the internet of transactions. And that is because blockchain technology is what enables a Bitcoin Bitcoin to work and transfer an asset of value directly between parties over the internet without needing the services of a third party. As I described, if you actually want to send money to someone else anywhere in the world, over the internet, you need to use the services of a bank. You can't simply just take some money, attach it to an email, and send it to someone else. You need a bank, you need a credit card, or some sort of third-party provider like a PayPal. But with a Bitcoin, you can do that transfer directly peer-to-peer. And what enables you to do that is blockchain technology. Now, where I want to point out to you the value of blockchain is that when the internet was designed, it originally was meant as a way of sharing information. I like to describe it as the internet broke. And that's because when the internet was created, it was a very open mechanism for universities to be able to share information, or you could just share information with anybody else. But that simply doesn't work with an asset of value. For example, you can see what happened to the music industry when people were able to take songs, turn them into MP3s, and then share those MP3s all over the world. There was no longer a need to buy a song because you could just get it for free. So the concept of being able to transfer an asset of value over the internet was critical. And it wasn't until Bitcoin and blockchain came along that you're able to create a digital asset that's unique and can be transferred directly peer-to-peer over the internet without needing the services of a third party. Let's go over now 3 key value areas for blockchain.
In this lesson, we will be discussing the value of blockchain. And to do so, I want to focus specifically on 3 key areas where blockchain adds additional value on top of what the internet is able to regularly do. The first one is value. As we have explained, through the use of blockchain, you can actually transfer a digital asset directly to another party over the internet without needing a third party. As we explained, the problem with the internet is that if you take a photo, for instance, a digital photo, and you email it to someone else, you're not really sending that photo. You are sending a copy of that photo. The original photo is still in your hard drive. And this is one of the key problems that happened with the music industry. When people were able to take a song, convert it into an MP3, and share it to other people, you basically lose the value of that song. Why? Because you have an unlimited quantity of MP3s which you can create. They're digital copies of it. But through the use of blockchain, you can enable what's known as digital scarcity. You can create a digital asset that's unique. And then by using blockchain, you're able to transfer that unique digital asset directly to another party over the internet without needing a third party. The next area is trust. Blockchain enables creating a permanent, secure, and unalterable record of who owns what. You have a single source of truth, permanently recorded on blockchain. Through the use of hash cryptography, you can have digital fingerprints of every single transaction that happens, and you can make sure that if that digital fingerprint is accurate, nobody has tampered with that information. So through the use of advanced cryptography, blockchain can create a permanent, secure, and unalterable record of who actually owns what. The next area where blockchain adds value is reliability. Blockchain is often referred to as distributed ledger technology, and that is because you can have multiple copies of that blockchain and you can spread them across a decentralized network. What that means is that instead of having a single point of failure like a centralized database that you could hack, instead you have multiple copies of this blockchain and they will be spread across multiple computers distributed across a network. This makes information stored on blockchain much more reliable since there's no single point of failure which can bring the entire system down.
As we continue to expand on the value of blockchain, let's talk a little bit about the history of blockchain and how it's been developing in its usage. So we mentioned that Bitcoin is the best known and most popular version of blockchain that's out there. It's been running since 2009. It's never been hacked, and it's a very secure environment. And as you have been seeing, there's a very, very big growth in adoption of people using Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin, what it enables you to do is to have a digital asset that you can actually exchange between parties securely over the internet. That specifically is called cryptocurrency.
Cryptocurrency is a type of digital asset which can be used to exchange value between parties. It uses cryptography to secure how it's transferred and to control the creation of new units of that currency.
Unlike a currency of a government, like a fiat currency, like say the US dollar, or the yen or the yuan, all of those are actually printed by a government. So a centralized institution says, let's create more currency, and they create thousands and thousands or millions or billions more of that currency. With a cryptocurrency, that's not at all the case. Cryptocurrencies are actually created by the same mathematical formulas that make the cryptocurrency work. And that's what Bitcoin does. So as we explained, Bitcoin is created by this network of thousands of specific nodes called miners. And these miners are able to process these transactions, and in the same process, they're able to create new currency, new units of Bitcoin to be used. Now, going from that perspective, Bitcoin is only one type of cryptocurrency, and there are many more. Many of them have been based on the same premise of what Bitcoin is. For example, Litecoin. Litecoin is a type of cryptocurrency that works very similar to Bitcoin, but instead of having to wait 10 minutes for a transaction block to be processed, Litecoin actually does it in about 2.5 minutes. It doesn't have as big of a market cap. Like the price per Litecoin is lower than Bitcoin at the time of this recording, but it's a very effective process and has some variations from Bitcoin. What you'll find is many of these cryptocurrencies take the concept of a Bitcoin, which is a digital asset that can be used to exchange value securely over the internet, peer-to-peer, and they take different angles to it. So we spoke about Litecoin, but there are other ones. So for example, there's Zcash and there's Monero. Zcash and Monero are other cryptocurrencies which are more anonymous than what Bitcoin is. As I explained, a Bitcoin is actually not anonymous, it's actually pseudonymous because you can track the movement of a Bitcoin from different addresses. But other currencies that have been coming out are actually more anonymous and it's harder to track than them. Another one is Dash, which is actually a short for digital cash. And there are other ones as well. But this premise of a cryptocurrency expands beyond just a digital asset.
In this lesson, we're going to be talking about digital tokens, sometimes called blockchain tokens. Now, by this point, we've talked about Bitcoin and we've talked about cryptocurrencies. Now, when we look about a Bitcoin transfer value, what you're transferring is a digital asset. You're basically transferring a Bitcoin, which is a digital asset, directly over the internet, peer-to-peer. Now, you're transferring a digital asset. It's not like you're transferring a dollar bill or a coin. You're transferring just a piece of information. It's a digital asset. That information is recorded on a blockchain and it's recorded permanently and immutably. Furthermore, that transaction is recorded on the blockchain, which is distributed. That is, there's not just one copy of the blockchain, there's thousands of copies of that blockchain around the world. As a result, it's distributed and there's no single point of failure. All that information is secured using cryptography. Now, this is all very clean that you can actually do a transfer of a digital asset over the internet. But how can you transfer something that's not digital? Like, for example, the title to a property, such as a house or a work of art. How can you transfer that over the internet? One way to do that is by leveraging something called a colored coin. Now, what a colored coin entails is adding some additional information onto a value of Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. You're recording additional information, this information is called metadata, onto that transaction so that you can represent the ownership of an asset. You're basically representing real world assets written on top of a transaction using a Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. These are what is known as colored coins. Now, a more popular approach, colored coins haven't really taken on that strongly. A much more popular approach is the concept of digital tokens, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about now. These digital tokens are also called blockchain tokens. Let me give you a definition of what a digital token is. A digital token is a digital asset that can represent anything. Some examples include securities, loyalty points, and real-world assets. You see, we are creating a form of cryptocurrency which is called a digital token. And that's true. There are thousands of cryptocurrencies, and many of these are digital tokens. And these digital tokens represent other things, not just pieces of value like a Litecoin or a Monero or a Bitcoin. They can represent real things, such as loyalty points and real-world assets. Let me give you some examples of digital tokens so it's clearer for you. One of these is called AudioCoin, and you can look up AudioCoin. You'll find out that this is a digital token, a cryptocurrency, that's meant for the music industry. What it's used as is a way of rewarding fans of a musician. So for example, Bjork, when she issued one of her albums, she included a certain amount of AudioCoin with it. What that means is that if you buy her CD, you actually also receive a certain amount of AudioCoin. What's interesting about these audio coins that are issued is that they have a value of their own, which goes up and goes down. And you can actually sell these audio coins in cryptocurrency exchanges, and you can actually get compensated for it. Another digital token use is Golem. Now, Golem is a very innovative new way of looking at computers by letting you outsource your computing power on your computer. So a very similar way of looking at this is Airbnb. In Airbnb, you can have a spare room in your house and you can rent it out to other people and get paid to have somebody stay at your house. Well, by using Golem, you can actually get compensated in Golem, which is a digital token. It's a cryptocurrency. And you get compensated for letting people run computing programs on your computer. Your computer may be sitting at home doing nothing, but if you're running Golem, you can actually have your computer be processing computing power for other people, and you can get compensated in Golem. And these Golem cryptocurrency, you can go to a cryptocurrency exchange and sell it. So it's a way of you to get compensated for letting people use your computer at home that's not being used. Another digital token use is VeChain. Now, VeChain is a cryptocurrency designed for tracking supply chains on the blockchain. So a very strong use of blockchain nowadays is supply chain, where you track the entire path of an asset as it's being created from its raw materials all the way through the end consumer. You have the supply chain, and we will talk about this further as we go on in this course. But VeChain is a digital token designed specifically for tracking supply chains on a blockchain. Another one of these digital tokens is Steemit. Steemit is a rewards platform for content publishers. Their vision is to compensate you for publishing content. You see, whenever you create content on Facebook or Twitter or any social media platform, traditionally you don't get compensated for that. But Facebook or Twitter or another social media platform turns around and they sell advertising using the content that you've published. That is, every time you create a picture and shows your cat or you show your family, well, they're turning around, they're using that content to deliver advertising to your friends and to you, and they get money because they get paid for running those ads. But you don't get any money. When it comes to Steemit, what they do is they leverage this digital token called Steem, and they compensate you in Steem for creating and publishing content on Steemit. So you, as a content publisher, get rewarded, and you can turn around and take the Steem and you can sell it, so you can actually get compensated for creating that content. Another very interesting use of digital tokens is CryptoKitties, and this involves collecting and breeding digital cats. What you see here is Satoshi Katamoto. That's actually a CryptoKitty that I own. This is a CryptoKitty, which is a digital asset that only I own. In the entire world, there's one Satoshi Katamoto, which you can see at that link right there. Now, what's interesting about Satoshi Katamoto is that this is a digital asset that is, in this case, a CryptoKitty that I own. And I can turn around and I can sell it to someone else. But I can also breed it with other people. And as a matter of fact, Satoshi has had multiple CryptoKitties. And if you visit that link, you'll be able to see more of my other CryptoKitties and this family of CryptoKitties that I own. These are all digital assets that I own. What's interesting is that beyond being just a game, these CryptoKitties can actually be sold. And Genesis, which is one of the original CryptoKitties, sold for over $100,000. And there have been many other CryptoKitties that have sold for very large amounts. The next use of digital tokens that I want to talk about is one of the primary uses in which digital tokens are being leveraged right now, and that is initial coin offerings. Now, initial coin offerings are known as ICOs, and what you see is initial coin offerings or initial token offerings. Both terms are being used. What you see here is the market as it goes. In 2017, $6.22 billion were raised using these initial coin offerings. What these initial coin offerings enable you to do is go to the market and raise capital from people. People could actually invest in new projects and startups that people have ideas for, and they would raise funds by issuing these initial coin offerings. What you would do is buy digital tokens for that project. 2017, it raised $6.22 billion. In 2018, $7.8 billion were raised using these ICOs. Now, key things I want you to understand about these is that this is a new investment mechanism that couldn't be done before these digital tokens. But now that we have these digital tokens, they're being used for many different ways, and ICOs is one of the primary ways they're being used.
So we've been talking about how Bitcoin is just one application of blockchain. And we stepped beyond that and we said that items or different applications like Bitcoin is a type of application called a cryptocurrency. That's only one way that you can use a blockchain. So this part, we're going to talk about how we can just take this whole concept of assigning value to an asset and being able to exchange it above and beyond and take it to a whole new level. And that's what's called smart contracts. Because smart contracts allow you to take this same type of functionality of assigning a value and assigning different conditions to it so that you can actually work the whole exchange of something of value. So let's think this through. For example, whenever you buy a house, one of the key things you will do is you have to find out who owns the house, right? You then need to come up with some sort of legal agreement. That legal agreement will allow you to assign ownership from owner A to owner B. That's how you buy a house, right? As it currently stands, you need a third party, such as a broker or need some sort of bank to be involved in this transaction of value. We said it's very similar as when you actually do money, right? So whenever you want to send money over the internet, typically what you do is you need to have a credit card or you need to go to a clearinghouse such as a PayPal or a bank and be able to do that transfer. Why? Because there's multiple parties involved and you need one centralized location to handle that processing of the transaction. That's why we had the whole concept of banks are in the middle of any type of financial transaction. Bitcoin revolutionized that, as we said, and Bitcoin allows you to do a peer-to-peer transfer of currency and value over the internet. Let's apply that to other things. So if we've defined that you can create a colored coin or a blockchain token of any type of property, such as a real estate asset, then if somebody wants to sell a house, why would you need to have a bank? Why not just do it over the internet, the same way that you would do an exchange of value from one party to another using something like Bitcoin? And that's exactly what smart contracts allow us to do. In a nutshell, what that description of a smart contract does is apply the same concept that Bitcoin applies to money by disintermediating the process of any type of contractual obligation. So once you get the premise that you can build value and tie it onto a blockchain and you can actually transfer value digitally by using a blockchain, you can expand beyond that and give it all the agreements and the different requirements of a contract and have it all automated. What this does is that a smart contract is nothing more than a computer program that takes all the concepts of what a contract would do and it automates that and builds it on a blockchain. Because it's running on a blockchain, the program will actually be self-executing and it's immutable. What that means is that you can rely on the contractual obligations to be done automatically and you don't have to worry about the fact that a third party may tamper with it or that they may be subject to a malicious hacking or anything along those sides. It also reduces costs because you don't have to pay a third party to process this. It's all handled conveniently by a single contractual program that runs it. Smart contracts is one of the most exciting areas in the space of blockchain, and you should be familiar with it. There's a name that comes up when you're talking smart contracts regularly. It's Nick Szabo. And that's because Nick Szabo, widely regarded as the father of smart contracts, wrote about smart contracts as early as 1994. In an article he wrote about smart contracts, he described the following. A smart contract is a computerized transaction protocol that executes the terms of a contract. The general objectives are to satisfy common contractual conditions such as payment terms, liens, confidentiality, and even enforcement, minimize exceptions, both malicious and accidental, and minimize the need for trusted intermediaries. Related economic goals include lowering fraud loss, arbitrations and enforcement costs, and other transaction costs. In a nutshell, what that description of a smart contract does is apply the same concept that Bitcoin applies to money by disintermediating the process of any type of contractual obligation.
We established that smart contracts are a way for computers to actually do the type of interaction that would be required to do in any type of contract or agreement, and you do that computerized in a way that's disintermediated, automated, self-executing, and immutable. Well, if you take all of these agreements and start combining them in different ways, you could reach the next evolution of it, and that is to develop what is called a decentralized autonomous organization, or a DAO. You'll also hear the term sometimes decentralized autonomous corporation, DAC. But typically the term DAO is more often used because not all organizations are corporations. And I want to get into the details of why this is such a revolutionary concept. Because what a decentralized autonomous organization is a collection of smart contracts. Basically what you're doing is you're reaching multiple agreements and you're doing them all to be running self-executing and immutably, automatically on a blockchain. When you look at an organization, what an organization really is a collection of agreements. An organization establishes different parties have different things that they need to do, and they may reach inflection points where they need to interact with each other. There are certain rules for doing that interaction between each other, an exchange of value, different rules of what they need to do. So in summary, what an organization really is a collection of agreements. Well, if you replace the term agreements with smart contracts, you can replace an organization with a decentralized autonomous organization by having a collection of smart contracts that runs automatically all these things. Because a DAO runs on a blockchain and it's running on a distributed network, you can have multiple combinations of different parties exchanging value and reaching agreements. What that means is that to a decentralized autonomous organization, it doesn't matter if you're a human being or if you're a robot. You can actually have devices communicating with devices, or devices communicating with people, or people communicating with people. To a decentralized autonomous organization, it makes no difference, because as long as it's programmed into this collection of smart contracts, the whole thing can run automatically and immutably. So let's take a perfect example of how this could work out. Let's look at an organization like Uber. So Uber is it's an organization that allows you to just call a car for yourself using a mobile app. Once you place your call, a driver will come up in a car, the car will pick you up, and the driver will drive you to your destination. The app will take care of processing the payment, and the driver will be set off to go to the next rider. Now that entire process is run by a mobile app. However, there's a human component, which is the driver that drives over and drives off. But if you actually tie in artificial intelligence into the equation, there's no reason why there needs to be a driver to come up and interact with you. You could have a self-driving car come over and pick you up. Because the entire thing is running on a blockchain, the whole thing is automated, self-executing, and immutably. So you can actually process payment directly on the app, and the car will interact with you directly without requiring a human element. This is the type of power that can be created into a decentralized autonomous organization. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be replaced by a computer. You could actually have multiple human beings on a distributed network, and those human beings will actually reach these agreements based on smart contracts between each other. But you can also go to the other extreme and say that self-driving car, when it needs to go gas up, it can simply drive to a gas station and interact with an automated gas pump. That gas pump will interact with the self-driving vehicle, process an entire transaction, and then the car can drive off to the next passenger. So all of that is possible on a decentralized autonomous organization.
In this lesson, I am going to be addressing business use cases of blockchain beyond Bitcoin. This is a very special lesson for me because it's one of the key questions that I receive from students all around the world. And the reason is a lot of people think Bitcoin is the only main application of blockchain, and that's not true. In fact, blockchain is changing many industries, and it's not just a matter of visionary talk, it's literally happening. So in this lesson, I am going to go through 5 specific examples of business cases that are already active with real results, where you can see the difference that blockchain is making in changing the world. While I'm on it, I'd like to let you know that I regularly publish business use cases like this via the free resources that I provide for you as part of this course. One of them is my YouTube channel, and the other one is the Daily Blockchain Informer, where I curate daily all the top stories in Bitcoin, blockchain, and cryptocurrency in general. So I encourage you to follow there. These 5 business cases are just the tip of the iceberg, and there are many, many other cases. So when you see me in the courses that I go, we are changing the world one blockchain at a time, I mean it. And I want you to see exactly what I mean in this lesson. I hope you enjoy it. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 success cases. These are real success cases that have been implemented with real results. Number 5, supply chain management. In a high-profile success case for blockchain, Walmart was able to establish a blockchain trial with IBM. The objective was to track pork products across China. By implementing blockchain, Walmart has been able to reduce the time it takes to track food issues from days to minutes. Considering that a food contamination crisis would require the fastest response possible, being able to reduce the issues from days to minutes has the potential to have a massive impact. A 1% reduction in foodborne diseases in the USA market is equal to $700 billion in savings. That number is much larger when you contemplate a global market. It is also estimated that 48 million people in the United States will become ill from foodborne diseases. So implementing this blockchain solution, which has proven very successful, is very beneficial to Walmart. At number 4 is real estate impacts from blockchain. Blockchain has been able to have a big impact in a success case that was presented by Australian banks ANZ and Westpac. This was a partnership they struck with IBM, and the objective was to digitize commercial property lease guarantees. This was a very successful trial in which they were able to increase transparency and reduce risk, error, and fraud. At the number 3 spot, another high-profile success case for blockchain took place in insurance and its impact with Maersk, the world's largest container shipping company. They conducted a trial in partnership with Microsoft where they were handling shipping insurance. They wanted to keep better tabs on the whole insurance process. They were able to do a 20-week proof of concept, which was highly successful in making auditing aspects of their shipping supply chain easier. This achieved an improvement of tamper resistance and also enabled for sharing of data in real time. At the number 2 spot is blockchain's impact on certificates of authenticity. DNV, in partnership with Deloitte, established instant verification of certificates of authenticity on a blockchain. By leveraging blockchain technology, they were able to add 90,000 certificates to be verifiable on a blockchain. This improves their tamper resistance, and it reduces fraud and counterfeiting. And at the number 1 spot is humanitarian aid and how blockchain is saving lives. The United Nations, through their United Nations World Food Program, used Ethereum to aid Syrian refugees. They have successfully fed 10,000 Syrian refugees, which are living in the Azraq camp in Jordan. The blockchain technology enabled them to increase transparency. In the process, they reduced fraud and theft and lowered intermediary costs. We've talked about the benefits and the value of blockchain, but we also need to focus on the limitations of blockchain because there are some marked limitations that make blockchain not the right choice for many different situations. And you need to know those. For example, blockchain is in a very early stage. And what that means is that there aren't that many projects fully fleshed out and developed. that apply blockchain. There's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of plans, but actual developed proofs of concept that are successful and out there, still very early stage, and they're just not there. Which also is part of the whole lack of awareness, because there's a lot of discussion about blockchain and people may have some buzz around it, but people don't really know the true value of blockchain and how they could implement it into different situations. This is also in part because there is a limited available pool of technical talent. There are a lot of developers that do a lot of different things, but there's not that many developers that have specialized expertise in blockchain. And that lack of developers is actually a hindrance to developing anything on blockchain. Another key limitation of blockchain is due to one of its key strengths, and that's the fact that blockchain is immutable. So when you think it through, the fact that it's immutable implies that you cannot make any changes to any of the records. That's wonderful if you want to keep the integrity of a record and make sure that nobody ever tampers with it. But it's really a horrible thing if you need to make any revisions or you need to go back and make any reversals. Say somebody processes a payment and you need to go back and make an amendment to change that payment. So the answer is, if you're using blockchain, that's simply impossible. Another key problem with blockchain is the concept of key management. As we mentioned, blockchain is built on cryptography, and cryptography implies there's different keys. You have public keys, you have private keys. But when you're dealing with a private key, you're also running the risk that somebody may lose access to their private key. This happened a lot in the early days when Bitcoin wasn't worth that much. People would just collect a lot of Bitcoin and then suddenly forgot what the key was, and those may be worth millions of dollars today, but by now it's too late. Another key factor with Bitcoin and blockchain is scalability. I mentioned Bitcoin specifically because this is an area that's being very severely addressed in Bitcoin, is to get that scalability factor to the point where it actually can handle large volumes. Because Bitcoin was not developed to do the large-scale volumes of transactions that many of the other institutions are doing. It's a work in progress. And so are blockchains. So many of these processes just simply haven't gotten there yet, and scalability is a key factor at this point. And the last one I'd like to talk about is the time to process. So as I mentioned, in Bitcoin, to be able to process a block of transactions takes about 10 minutes. And that's because you have to get consensus across all the different nodes, and that's when you can actually get to the full consensus and get the transactions out. That's 10 minutes. But if you're a bank that's used to process transactions in a matter of seconds, or if you need to do high-speed transfers and you need to handle things in a matter of microseconds, blockchain is not the right choice for those. In this lesson, I'd like to go over some common misconceptions about blockchain and Bitcoin. By this point in the course, you've learned a lot about both topics, but there are some common misconceptions which you will run into occasionally, and I want to make sure you're aware of them because they're going to come up, and I want you to know exactly what to say whenever you face that. The first misconception you'll hear is that Bitcoin is anonymous. And I want to clarify that Bitcoin is not anonymous. Bitcoin is actually what's known as pseudonymous. Because when you're in the Bitcoin network, your Bitcoin address is your identity. And because Bitcoin has an open blockchain, every transaction done on the Bitcoin network keeps a permanent record on the public open blockchain. So whenever you move money around with your Bitcoin address, the rest of the world can see it, and it's a permanent record. It's very similar to a stage name for an artist. So when an artist has a stage name, people don't know their real name. But if at some point they find out their real name, all of a sudden their cover is blown. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. When you have a Bitcoin address, nobody needs to know your name. But anytime you come in contact with the real world, say for example, you're going to an exchange and you need to exchange Bitcoins for currency, you need to do what's known as KYC, which is Know Your Customer. And that's done because they need to get your identity in order to give you regular fiat currency. So at that point, your Bitcoin address gets matched with your real identity, and you no longer are anonymous. You're actually pseudonymous. Another good story about the fact that Bitcoin is pseudonymous revolves around an online marketplace called Silk Road. Now, Silk Road was a darknet marketplace in 2011 that was known for selling illegal drugs. And one of the primary ways for people to pay for these drugs was actually using Bitcoin. Well, the dark web actually kept people hidden away. But in 2013, FBI was able to shut them down. And they did that by following the trail of Dread Pirate Roberts, who actually ran Silk Road. Now, Dread Pirate Roberts believed that he was anonymous when using Bitcoin, but that was not the case. In fact, the FBI was seeing exactly every transaction that was being done by Dread Pirate Roberts because they were matching his Bitcoin address to his transactions. And that eventually led to his arrest and shutting down Silk Road. So Bitcoin is not anonymous, which leads me to the next misconception. People think that Bitcoin is used for laundering money and for criminal activities. And like I mentioned, Silk Road got shut down because of the fact that the FBI was able to track all the transactions on the open blockchain. So because of this, people who are using cryptocurrency for laundering money put themselves at risk because you can track every single transaction on the public open blockchain. So Bitcoin is not a good choice for laundering money or for any type of criminal activity. Which leads me to the next misconception. The next misconception is about blockchain and the fact that people think that blockchain is a better type of database. And that's not the case at all. Because blockchain, as I mentioned, is actually a type of ledger. And yes, a ledger can be considered a database, but you see, a database can do many things, and you don't have to be limited by what the data structure of a blockchain does. Because a blockchain is actually chronologically ordered, and it leaves a permanent record which is immutable, so you can't go back and make any reversals. So say, for example, you're a bank, and you need to keep transactions on a database, and then you need to make reversals. Well, that wouldn't be possible in a blockchain because every transaction on a blockchain is permanent and immutable. So blockchain is not a better type of database. Which leads me to another misconception, and the fact that people think that blockchain is Bitcoin. And they assume that blockchain is Bitcoin and every single blockchain implementation needs to behave like Bitcoin. And that's not the case. Blockchain has expanded far and above Bitcoin. As we explained, blockchain is only one of the technologies being used in Bitcoin. And if you take this blockchain technology and pull it out, it's currently being used in many, many other areas. Like, for example, supply chain management. It's being done in titles, in real estate. It's being brought into healthcare. So blockchain as a technology is expanding well above what Bitcoin is. So blockchain is not Bitcoin. And I want to end on probably the most common misconception. And that is that you need to buy a full Bitcoin to get into Bitcoin. And as you'll learn later in the course, you don't need to buy a full Bitcoin to get into Bitcoin because in a price of thousands of dollars, that's quite an expensive proposition. You can get into Bitcoin for far less than a full Bitcoin. And Bitcoins are divisible all the way down to 100 million times into something called a Satoshi. So when you get into Bitcoin, you don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. You can get in for far less. And those are the most common misconceptions about blockchain and Bitcoin. Let's go to the next lesson. A lot of people keep wondering, what is Bitcoin Cash? And how is it different from Bitcoin?
Let's go through a brief explanation of what Bitcoin Cash is and some history as to how Bitcoin Cash came about. For starters, Bitcoin Cash is a new cryptocurrency developed from a hard fork in the Bitcoin blockchain, and I'll be explaining to you exactly what that means later on in this lesson. But the key lesson here is that Bitcoin Cash is not Bitcoin. It is actually a different cryptocurrency altogether. What Bitcoin Cash is a different type of cryptocurrency that increased the block size of Bitcoin from 1 megabyte, which is what the limit was at the time of the fork, to 8 megabyte. This was as a result of the fact that Bitcoin had been trying to scale and there was a conflict internally on how to best proceed about increasing the 1 megabyte block size limit. What Bitcoin Cash did was launch a brand new cryptocurrency with an 8 megabyte limit. Key thing about Bitcoin Cash as well is that Bitcoin Cash does not have plans to implement segregated witness or SegWit, which is one of the solutions that was presented for Bitcoin as a scaling proposal. If you want to learn more about Bitcoin Cash actually has a project website which you can find at bitcoincash.org. Bitcoin Cash is also decentralized and is run by a global community, and there are multiple developers that can constantly upgrade and change the Bitcoin Cash protocol. If you want to learn more about Bitcoin Cash, I encourage you to visit bitcoincash.org. Let's go back to August 1st, which is the hard fork that triggered the launch of Bitcoin Cash. The Bitcoin blockchain is a constantly updated ledger listing all the transactions that take place on the Bitcoin network, all the way back to the Genesis block, which is the first transaction block that took place in January 2009. New blocks are added to this Bitcoin blockchain approximately every 10 minutes with the latest transactions. The Bitcoin protocol ensures that every single block that gets added to that blockchain is valid and conforms to the rules of Bitcoin. Furthermore, each block that is added contains a cryptographic hash of the previous block, thereby forming a blockchain. This is what keeps the integrity of the actual Bitcoin blockchain, ensuring that each block that is added to this blockchain is consistent with the other blocks before it. On August 1st, at block number 478,558, there was a split, and the VIA BTC pool produced a 1.9 megabyte block, which is not valid on the legacy Bitcoin network because Bitcoin has a 1 megabyte limit, and this new block did not have the 1 megabyte limit and instead actually included 1.9 megabytes. This caused a split. And what happens is that that split is what is now Bitcoin Cash. That is a completely different cryptocurrency, and the computers that are mining Bitcoin Cash have a protocol that limits the block size at 8 megabytes rather than 1 megabyte. What this causes is that they're in parallel two actual Bitcoins. One is Bitcoin Cash, which is a completely different cryptocurrency, and then you have the traditional Bitcoin, which continues moving forward. Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash are not compatible. What that means is that you cannot pay for a product in Bitcoin by using Bitcoin Cash. And the key thing you need to understand also is that Bitcoin Cash keeps growing and moving, and the 1.9 megabyte block was only one of many. There are many other blocks beyond that 1.9 megabyte that have been bigger than the 1 megabyte limit. As you will be able to see in this diagram, there is a split that takes place at 478,558. That's the block where there was the fork that split apart. What that means is that anybody that was holding Bitcoin prior to block 478558 automatically would receive 2 coins. They would have all the coins that they had on the Bitcoin chain at 478,558 plus all the coins that would now become what is Bitcoin Cash, because the Bitcoin Cash blockchain will go back all the way to a Genesis block that would take place on January 1st. However, that would not be a Bitcoin Cash token that was mined originally. It would just be something that was given because of the fact that the chain split. So what that means is that you would have a corresponding Bitcoin Cash coin for every single Bitcoin coin that you had as of block 478,558. This is what you may have heard other people saying. So just to put into context, let's assume you had 5 Bitcoins at block number 478,558. You would actually have 5 Bitcoins and you would have 5 Bitcoin Cash. You would get one of each. I'd like to take you now to some valuable websites where you can find out more about Bitcoin Cash and which will answer many questions that you may still have about what Bitcoin Cash is. The first one I'd like to encourage you to visit is bitcoincash.org, which is the project website for Bitcoin Cash. And this is the website where everything related to Bitcoin Cash is published. On that site, you will find the history of Bitcoin Cash, how it came about. You will have questions answered as to how Bitcoin Cash differs from Bitcoin. You can find out wallets that are compatible with Bitcoin Cash. And as well, you can find out exchanges where you can actually buy and sell Bitcoin Cash. As I mentioned, Bitcoin Cash is not Bitcoin, and not every exchange carries Bitcoin Cash. So these are the ones that are actually carrying Bitcoin Cash, and it's important for you to know those if you actually want to participate in Bitcoin Cash. Another website I'd like to encourage you to visit is coinmarketcap.com, which tracks cryptocurrency market capitalization. And what CoinMarketCap.com does is it keeps track of all the cryptocurrencies out there, and it lists the price for each one of them as they are being traded, as well as the supply and the volume and the different changes in it, if it's gone up, if it's gone down. The reason why I want to bring you here is that you can see that Bitcoin is tracked as a completely different cryptocurrency from Bitcoin Cash. As you see, Bitcoin at the time of this recording has a price of $3,785 high, while Bitcoin Cash has a price of 319. And I wanted to point out that Bitcoin has a symbol of BTC, while Bitcoin Cash has a different symbol of BCH. It's important to note that BCH is the symbol being tracked here in CoinMarketCap.com, but some websites list Bitcoin Cash as BCC or XBC. This is actually a situation that's being resolved at the time of this recording because there is a prior cryptocurrency that had been using the symbol BCC. As a result, Bitcoin Cash has problems being able to be listed as BCC because there is a prior cryptocurrency using that symbol. That being said, you may find some websites that will list Bitcoin Cash as BCC and other websites, such as this one, listing Bitcoin Cash as BCH. The point is, when you see Bitcoin Cash, make sure that it is Bitcoin Cash as we are speaking, which is the fork based off of Bitcoin. As I had shown in the previous field trip for Bitcoin, I took you to a block explorer so you could see how Bitcoin actually is constantly updating the Bitcoin blockchain. Similar block explorers also exist for Bitcoin Cash, and you can see the activity in them. I'm going to take you to two of them right now so you can see Bitcoin Cash in action. This is blockdozer.com, which tracks the information for Bitcoin Cash, and these are the latest transactions for Bitcoin Cash. You can see the hash for each one of the transactions. You can see the height of each block. You can see the number of transactions and the size of these transactions. It's a great site where you can find information of what's going on. I wanted to point out one specific block, which is block number 478571. So you can see something interesting about Bitcoin Cash, and that is the fact that in this block, this Bitcoin Cash block had 4,331 transactions in it for a total of 4.68 megabytes in size. So it's 4,683,334 bytes. So this block is actually 4.68 megabytes, which is much bigger than the 1 megabyte limit imposed by Bitcoin. This is the reason why Bitcoin Cash exists, or the primary reason, which is to be able to have no limit, or at least a limit up to 8 megabytes for the block size of transaction blocks. Another block explorer I want to take you to is blockchair.com, which also tracks Bitcoin Cash. And this gives you a different view of all the different blocks that are mined in Bitcoin Cash. So to complete this lesson, I wanted to give a quick review of what we've covered in it. The first one is that Bitcoin Cash is a new cryptocurrency, which was developed from a hard fork in the Bitcoin blockchain. Bitcoin Cash increases the block size to 8 megabytes from the 1 megabyte limit that was prior to the fork. I encourage you to visit the Bitcoin Cash website at bitcoincash.org. And if you want to track how Bitcoin Cash is changing, and you can see the different blocks as they are being mined and as they're being added to the Bitcoin Cash blockchain, you can do so at blockdozer.com and blockchair.com.
Hey everyone, George Levy here. In this lesson, we're going to talk about forks. Specifically, we're going to look at hard forks, we're going to look at soft forks, and we're going to look at the difference between a hard fork and a soft fork. What's interesting is that Bitcoin has been through both, and it both happened on the same month. So Bitcoin now has been through a hard fork that created Bitcoin Cash, that brand new cryptocurrency that spawned off of Bitcoin, and now it activated SegWit by using a soft fork. In this lesson, we're going to analyze both hard forks versus soft forks, and we're going to end the entire lesson with a look at SegWit, so you know exactly what SegWit is. Let's do this.
In this lesson, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin forks and segregated witness. We will cover the following topics, starting with what is a fork. We'll then talk about a hard fork, which is what created Bitcoin Cash, that separate cryptocurrency that was created on August 1st as a result of the hard fork that took place on Bitcoin. We'll then talk about a soft fork. Segregated witness, or SegWit, was activated via a soft fork. We will explain what that is in this lesson where we go into soft forks. We will then talk about what is SegWit. Let's begin first with what is a fork. A fork, in its easiest way to understand, takes place when a blockchain splits into two different paths forward. Imagine that you're walking down a road and you come upon a fork and you have to make a choice. Do you turn right or do you turn left? If you're in the matrix, do you take the red pill or do you take the blue pill? Bottom line, a fork basically means that a blockchain splits into two different paths forward, and there are many reasons why that happens. Let's explain a hard versus a soft fork. A hard fork on a blockchain, in this case the Bitcoin blockchain, introduces a change that forces everyone to upgrade, and we'll explain more in detail what that is when we talk about Bitcoin Cash. A soft fork introduces change that is backwards compatible. What that means is that you don't have to necessarily upgrade. You won't get kicked out of the blockchain for not upgrading. You will not be able to do certain things because you didn't upgrade, but the fork can continue going forward and you can participate even if you do not upgrade. This is what happens with a segregated witness when it was activated. Some interesting facts about forks. Forks on Bitcoin happen on a regular basis, actually. Whenever two or more miners solve a block at the same time, for a moment they're separate chains, because a miner may have found the nons at the same exact time as another miner, and at that moment they're both winners. So at that point, both of them are leading the chain. Eventually, one of the chains wins over the other. So the system self-regulates, and the more miners merge with one specific chain over the other, eventually the longest chain wins, and everybody follows that longest chain. When that happens, the blocks that initially had won but eventually were not the longest chain become what is known as an orphan block. Those blocks are released back and the transactions are pushed back into the mempool, which is the place where transactions are kept waiting to confirm. So they're not lost, they're actually pushed back into something called the mempool. Let's now talk about a hard fork by looking at Bitcoin Cash. On August 1st, Bitcoin Cash was born out of a hard fork. In fact, it was a user-activated hard fork, and that is because the miners decided to implement this hard fork that would create Bitcoin Cash. That took place on August 1st, 2017, and specifically at block 478,558. When Bitcoin Cash activated the new protocol, it caused a split in the chain. And it was a hard fork because whomever had not already implemented an upgrade to follow along with the new chain couldn't follow along. And that's why Bitcoin Cash went off on its own path while Bitcoin continued in the other direction, because many of the miners that were on the Bitcoin blockchain did not upgrade to the Bitcoin Cash protocol. Let's look at it in a different direction. When we look at a blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain is a constantly updated ledger of transactions all the way back to the Genesis block. That's block number 0, which is where the whole Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin blockchain began. New blocks are added approximately every 10 minutes with the latest transactions, and each of those blocks contains a cryptographic hash of the previous block. This is what forms the blockchain. They're all tied cryptographically together. On August 1st, there was a new type of block that was created, a 1.9 megabyte block. And that's because via BTC, the pool, was already running the Bitcoin Cash protocol. This caused a split because the Bitcoin Cash protocol actually allowed for 8 megabyte blocks, while the rest of the Bitcoin protocol did not allow for the 8 megabyte blocks. This caused a split in the blockchain. The ones that would subscribe to the 8 megabyte block, that's what created Bitcoin Cash, and the ones that were still at the 1 megabyte limit continued on the Bitcoin blockchain. Let us now look a soft fork by exploring how segregated witness was activated on Bitcoin. To be exact, the soft fork took place on August 24th, and it was done through a process called a UASF, or User Activated Soft Fork. Segregated witness was locked in on the 8th of August 2017 at block number 479,707. Notice that this is a higher block than the 478,558, which is the block where Bitcoin Cash split off. So by now, the segregated witness soft fork was taking place on the Bitcoin main chain, not on Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash has nothing to do with segregated witness. It's a separate cryptocurrency by this point. Notice that segregated witness was not activated on the 8th of August, but rather on August 24th. This soft fork with segregated witness did not cause a split in the chain. Some of the changes, and I'm going to be explaining what segregated witness is that it replaces the block size limit with a different way of measuring the space by calling it the block weight limit, and this frees up some space. I will explain more in detail as we go on with this lesson. What took place on August 8th at block number 479,707 is that there were enough miners supporting this segregated witness mandatory activation that it was locked in. It was going to happen. However, the process needed to continue until block 481,824 when the system activated segregated witness and it became live. Now, what happened at block number 481,824 is that the nodes that were running segregated witness were starting to create transactions including segregated witness. Notice that there isn't a split, because you can still run Bitcoin transactions the old way with the 1 megabyte limit, but there's now this new functionality called segregated witness. And what that means is that the miners that have already upgraded to segregated witness can begin to process and create transactions using segregated witness. However, any miner that has not upgraded yet to segregated witness would still be able to remain on the chain. However, they would not be able to participate in segregated witness transactions. Let's discuss now what is segregated witness. Segregated witness at its core is a protocol upgrade. It basically improves the scalability of Bitcoin without increasing the block size. SegWit also works to address a vulnerability in Bitcoin, which is called transaction malleability. SegWit works to resolve this transaction malleability. The soft fork that was presented for segregated witness does not require upgrading to remain on the blockchain. What that means is that miners that have not upgraded to segregated witness can still remain on the blockchain. As a result of the soft fork, segregated witness did not cause a split in the chain. Now what we'll do is we'll analyze what segregated witness is. To do that, let's first look at the contents of a Bitcoin transaction. A Bitcoin transaction has three main components. The first one is an input, and the input is where the coins are coming from or wherever the funds are coming from. It's got the amount, as in how many Bitcoins came in from a certain source. And the output is where those Bitcoins are actually headed, where they're going to be going. Those are the components of a Bitcoin transaction. A good way of looking at a Bitcoin transaction, even though it's not exact, but it's a good image to keep in mind, is that a Bitcoin transaction is very similar to a check. You have an input, which is where the Bitcoins or funds are coming from. You have the output, which is where they're going to be headed. And you have the amount of those Bitcoins that are going to be headed out to this output. And in order for a transaction to be able to happen, when somebody has Bitcoins, they need to be able to sign that transaction. And that's how you can make sure that your Bitcoins are not spent by someone that's not authorized. This is because you have the private key, or your wallet rather, has your private key and is able to sign every transaction, which only you control the private key. So that means that nobody else can spend your Bitcoins. This is the digital signature. Now, in a SegWit transaction, what happens is that this signature data, which is also known as the witness, is segregated to an extended block. That is, it's pulled out of the main block. And this is part of that change that we put as the block size limit versus the block weight. the digital signature information is pulled out into an extended block, which is separate from the transaction. This frees up approximately, it's estimated, between 60 to 63% of the data of the actual transaction. It's consumed by the signature data. Additionally, a key thing that SegWit does is that it includes the input and the amount, that is the transaction information, as part of the digital signature. In this chart, I'm right now showing the percentage of transactions that are segregated witness. And what you're going to see is, as time goes by, more and more segregated witness transactions will be forming part of the mix of Bitcoin transactions that are taking place. This will eventually lead to less congested networks, and it should also reduce transaction fees. A question that I've been getting from students is what will happen when there are no more Bitcoins left to mine? As I've explained, miners actually get rewarded for processing and confirming transactions. That's why you mine Bitcoins, because you're actually providing the computer system and actually being able to process and confirm all these transactions. And in return for taking care of the Bitcoin network and actually processing and confirming these transactions, you are rewarded a certain amount of Bitcoin. At this precise moment, it's 12.5 Bitcoins per block, and a reward takes place approximately every 10 minutes. It's not exact, but it's roughly that time. So there will be a total number of 21 million Bitcoins in circulation. There will never be any more. And I wanted to go over that topic because some people say, well, what happens once you hit the 21 million Bitcoins? Why would miners continue mining blocks? Why would they even process and confirm transactions? Won't the whole Bitcoin network crash? Won't they just simply stop being? And let's analyze a little bit of that and look at all the different variables. So the key thing I want to talk about is the supply and number of Bitcoins in circulation. Right now I am referencing blockchain.info, which happens to have some incredibly valuable charts showing the number of Bitcoins in circulation, showing the block size, showing the price of Bitcoin. It has a lot of valuable info. For this specific example, I want to show you the number of Bitcoins in circulation. If we look at the chart, you will see that there's approximately, at this moment, about 6.3, it's actually 16,384,088 Bitcoins. And actually that number's a little bit higher because as of today's date, it's actually a few more days after that. But the point is, it's approximately 16.3 million Bitcoins. And that number keeps increasing by 12.5 Bitcoins approximately every 10 minutes whenever a new block gets mined. That number will continue to climb until we reach the total of 21 million Bitcoins. It is estimated that that max number will be reached in the year 2140. It can't be gauged exactly because you don't know what's going to happen until then, but at the current trend and how it's growing, that is estimated when it will actually happen, 2140. Now, one of the key things we need to take into consideration is that in addition to the mining rewards, there are also transaction fees. And these transaction fees are lower than financial institutions charge, but there are still transaction fees there. And miners, when they successfully mine a block, they also receive any associated transaction fees that were actually added to that, to all those transactions that are mined in that one specific block. Now, one of the key things we have to take into consideration is that with the increased demand for Bitcoin, which is one of the reasons why price has been going up, because more and more people are buying Bitcoin, and since there's a limited number of Bitcoins, you actually see the price being affected because there's only so many of them to be sold. So the volume of transactions also increases. And I wanted to show that to you because as you look at the transaction volume, you can clearly see a pattern of that volume trend going up. Another key thing we need to take into consideration is that there are strong efforts going on right now to increase the block size for Bitcoin. And what we mean by block size is how many transactions you can actually fit within a block. Right now there's a limit of 1 megabyte, and this actually puts constraints on Bitcoin, which means you can't really have as many transactions in one block if you only have 1 megabyte of space. As this gets resolved and over time, when if and when the block size increases, there will be far many more transactions available, and the volume will increase exponentially as well. This means there will be more transaction fees to be had with every single block that gets mined. The objective is that when we reach the year 2140, and it's very, very hard to think where mining will be in the year 2140, the transaction fees will be enough to justify because of the massive volume of people using Bitcoin. And that resolves what's going to happen when we hit that last Bitcoin that will be mined, estimated in the year 2140.
In this video, I'm going to explain to you exactly how we're going to get to 21 million Bitcoins by the year 2140, and also how we got to approximately 16.7 million at the time of this recording. In order to do that, I need to give you a little bit of background about Bitcoin and what's known as the controlled supply of Bitcoin. You see, Bitcoin will only have a maximum of 21 million Bitcoins, which will be created by the year 2140. And this was stipulated since the beginning by Satoshi Nakamoto. This limited supply of Bitcoin has some very carefully orchestrated rules as to how these Bitcoins are generated. You see, when Bitcoin started, the mining reward was not 12.5 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. It was actually 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. And Satoshi Nakamoto built it into the system that way because there were no Bitcoins at the time. So you needed to be able to create a lot of Bitcoins so there would be enough supply for everybody to use. So at the time, if you work it out, 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes works out to 7,200 Bitcoins daily. So that's how you were creating a lot of Bitcoins in the beginning. But Satoshi Nakamoto also took that into consideration and he built in something known as the halving. The halving is a process in Bitcoin that stipulates that every 4 years, actually it's 210,000 blocks, the amount of Bitcoins that are issued as a reward is cut in half. So what that means is that after the first halving, instead of giving away 50 Bitcoins to a miner, that miner would be receiving 25 Bitcoins for that mining reward. And that brought down the daily supply created down to 3,600 Bitcoins. And that process continued until the next halving, which actually took place in the year 2016 in July, which brought down that number to 12.5 Bitcoins, which is the current place where we are at the time of this recording. That translates into 1,800 new Bitcoins created on a daily basis. And that process will continue until the next halving. That next halving will take place in June 12th, 2020, and it will bring it down to 6.25 Bitcoins, which means that there will be a total of 900 Bitcoins created on a daily basis. And that will continue until the next halving. And you can keep up the math all the way to the year 2140, when you will see that we will reach the 21 million mark, which will mark the last Bitcoin that will ever be mined. While we're on the topic of Bitcoin, there are some very important dates that you should know, because these will come up on regular conversations when you talk Bitcoin with other people that know the space. The first one is October 31st, 2008. That was the day that the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto was published, and that's what began the whole Bitcoin movement. The next one is January 3rd, 2009, and that corresponds to the Genesis block. The first block of transactions that was published on the Bitcoin blockchain took place on that date. Next date you should know is May 22nd, 2010. May 22nd, 2010 was the first retail purchase, and it was actually the first time that anybody had actually used Bitcoin to buy any type of product. And it was actually 2 pizzas, so that day is called Pizza Day. And it was a man named Laszlo Hanyecz, and Laszlo posted on a Bitcoin forum that he was interested in buying pizza for Bitcoins. And he negotiated a $25 amount of pizza, which was 2 pizzas, for 10,000 Bitcoin. When you work out the numbers, that pegged the price per Bitcoin to 1/4 penny. So that means that he had to pay 4 Bitcoin for every penny worth of that $25 worth of 2 pizzas. The next date that you should be aware of is November 2013, which was the day that 1 Bitcoin passed the $1,000 mark. So that 1 Bitcoin that was worth 1/4 penny suddenly was worth $1,000. And the next date that you should know is March 2nd, 2017, because that was the day that 1 Bitcoin overtook the price of an ounce of gold. Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about a data structure called a Merkle tree. It's a very interesting concept. What you're going to learn is that Merkle trees are a big part of Bitcoin. However, it is possible to create a blockchain without using a Merkle tree. However, in Bitcoin, Merkle trees are used extensively. In this lesson, you're going to see how the Merkle tree and something specifically called a Merkle root is found in every single block in the Bitcoin blockchain. Enjoy.
Let's look at the concept of Merkle trees. And what we will do is we will look at Merkle trees in Bitcoin and how they are used extensively in creating the Bitcoin blockchain. To begin, let's look at a definition of what a Merkle tree is. A Merkle tree is a mathematical data structure composed of hashes of different blocks of data, and which serves as a summary of all the transactions in a block. I will explain in detail exactly how that works. Another way of calling a Merkle tree is what's known as a hash tree. It's actually a tree composed of hashes. As we explained, a cryptographic hash is a digital fingerprint of a certain amount of data. You can take a very extensive amount of data and narrow it all down to a single cryptographic hash. A Merkle tree is actually a structure built of all these hashes combined. And what we're doing is we are creating a new data structure that serves as a summary of all the transactions in a block by building a tree of all the cryptographic hashes in that specific block. Merkle trees are named after Ralph Merkle, who's one of the original creators of public key cryptography. He's also widely acknowledged as the inventor of cryptographic hashing. A key thing while we're talking about Merkle trees is that it is possible to create a blockchain without a Merkle tree. But as you'll be able to see in the continuation of this video, you will see how efficient Merkle trees make verifying the integrity of the data within a block in the Bitcoin blockchain. In order to do that, I'd like to take you to a block within a block explorer so you can see how the Merkle tree is reflected inside a block. To do that, what we will see is that there is a field that specifically says Merkle root. Now you notice that there's a difference between a Merkle tree and a Merkle root. And the reason is that the Merkle tree is a tree built of all the cryptographic hashes within that block of transactions. And the Merkle root is a single cryptographic hash that serves as a summary of all the transactions in that block. This is a very important element because as new blocks are created, we mentioned that when a new block is created, that block serves as a chain which includes the previous block's hash as well. So we said that every single block in a blockchain includes the previous block hash as soon as it creates that new block hash for that block. But also, as that part of creating that block, one of the fields that also gets hashed is the Merkle root. What that means is that if anybody were to make a change anywhere in any transaction in that block, that Merkle root would change. And in the process, that would also break the block hash for this specific block. So the Merkle root serves to further reinforce the integrity of the data that's included inside the block. In order to explain further, let's build a Merkle tree. And to do that, instead of creating a Merkle tree with 2,415 transactions like this block, I'm going to narrow it down to only 4 transactions because we're going to be able to see the same elements regardless of how many different transactions are included in a block. For this purpose, I'm only going to use 4 transactions: TX0, TX1, TX2, and TX3. As we stated, every transaction has a corresponding hash. This would be what would be the TX ID or the transaction ID for that transaction. And it is a cryptographic hash of the data included in that transaction. So far as we're building this Merkle tree, we have 4 hashes here, 1 hash corresponding to each of these 4 transactions. Now, as these Merkle trees are built, specifically Merkle trees in Bitcoin are what is known as binary hash trees. And the way that they work is that they combine pairs of hashes to create new hashes. This process is called concatenation. You're concatenating hashes to create new hashes. In this case, hash 0 and hash 1 are combined to create a new hash called hash 01. And you can combine hash 2 and hash 3 into hash 23. So as you can see, we have narrowed down from what was originally 4 hashes into only 2 hashes, hash 01 and hash 23. And if you were to change any data in any of the hashes below, those hashes would break. So now you can keep up climbing the Merkle tree, and if you combine hash 01 and hash 23, you come up with the Merkle root, which is a single hash that includes all the data from the hashes below. So as you can see, this Merkle root is a summary of all the hashes below. And if you were to make a change in any of the transactions below, it would break that Merkle root. Let's go back specifically to the Block Explorer and look at the Merkle root in the block we looked at. As you can see, this single hash, labeled as the Merkle root, encompasses all the information from all 2,415 transactions in this block. By leveraging a Merkle tree and narrowing down all that information to a single root, you're able to preserve the integrity of all these transactions in this block. And if anybody were to make a change in any of the transactions in this block, that Merkle root would change. As we explained, the Merkle root is also included as part of the process of creating the block hash. So if you change the Merkle root, you automatically break the block hash, and that would break the entire blockchain. And that is why Merkle trees are so important in Bitcoin.
In this video, I want to take you through a different view of Bitcoin, and I want to stress the fact that Bitcoin is a public blockchain. As a public blockchain, it means that all of the transactions that take place on Bitcoin are public, and you can see them and analyze them. You may be familiar with what a block explorer is. Right now, we're looking at blockchain.com/explorer, which is a block explorer which is put together by blockchain. If you actually look at the block explorer, you will find all the latest blocks that have taken place and that have been created on the Bitcoin blockchain. You'll find that as of this moment, the latest block is number 601,693. This is going to be the block hash for that specific block. You can find what's the height, the timestamp of when it was done. You can see the number of transactions, and there's a wealth of information available. In fact, we can go down. Let's go to the previous block right before that, 601,692. I can find the information for that one. You can see which is the height. You can even see the miner that actually created that block. You can find the timestamp of when it was created. You can see the number of transactions. There's a lot of information. If you go inside, you can actually see all the transactions that are here, and you can actually click into any of those transactions and see all the details about it. Now, this is a very common way of looking at Bitcoin, and it's what people typically use whenever you want to find out if a transaction has been confirmed, or if you just want to prove to somebody that transaction has actually been created and that it's been added to the Bitcoin blockchain. A block explorer is what you would use, and there are many of these. Blockchain.com/explorer is just one. But I want to take you now into different visualizations of the data that's inside Bitcoin. To do that, I'm going to start taking you through different viewpoints using the fact that the information on Bitcoin is public, and you can massage it and use it in many different ways. I'm going to take you through one of my favorite ones. This is actually called Bitcoin VR, and what it does is that it actually takes Bitcoin transactions and it gives you a visual representation as balloons or as zeppelins or blimps. In this specific case, what you find is that balloons are transactions that are less than 50 Bitcoins in size. For instance, this was 0.03 Bitcoins. This one's actually, let me see, this one's 0.33 Bitcoins. Here's another one of 0.02 Bitcoins. These are 0.02. And what you can see in all of these is you can actually see how much that would be in US dollars. You can even see the block hash, the specific transaction hash for that transaction. See, all that information is available on this visualization. You can find this visualization at bitcoin-vr.github.io. And this is just one way of looking at Bitcoin. I'm going to take you through several others because it's a lot of fun, and you can really start thinking about the fact that Bitcoin is working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, around the clock. There's no holidays, there's no taking days off, there's no Sunday off, the bank is closed, none of that. Bitcoin works around the clock, and it's constantly working. I want to take you now to Fiat Leak. Fiatleak.com gives you a totally different visualization, and this one actually focuses on transactions as they are taking place across different exchanges worldwide. And that information is actually telling you how fiat currency, that is a currency that's actually created by central banks, just stuff like dollars and euros and yen, and they're being converted into Bitcoin. And you can start seeing how we call it a fiat leak. There's a leak from the fiat into cryptocurrency. Here you've got euros being converted into Bitcoin. Right there you saw Japanese yen being converted. Here is Turkish lira. Interesting, Turkish lira. You can see here that's Mexican pesos. Here's Brazilian reals. So you can really step for some time and really see how Bitcoin is actually interacting and how fiat currencies are converted into Bitcoin. You can see that across the board. Right now, what you're seeing here are Nigerian nairas. I didn't actually know the name of their currency. These are Canadian dollars. These are being converted into Bitcoin. So if you want to spend some time, you can really see how much volume there is going across all these different currencies and switching into Bitcoin. The next one I want to focus into is real-time Bitcoin, because it also gives you other information you normally don't see. So what you see here is the exchange rate, and this is an average of what Bitcoin is trading for across multiple exchanges. But you can also see other information such as network power consumption. Now, this is not exact. This is what's estimated, but you can see the power consumption for the Bitcoin network, and you can see the number of Bitcoins in circulation. Right now, there are 18,021,175, and that number grows by 12.5 approximately every 10 minutes, and will eventually reach the maximum, which will be 21 million. But we will not reach that number until the year 2140. This one is one of my personal favorites. This is found at blocks.wizb.it. And what it lets you see is transactions taking place all around the world. And what it does is it moves the planet to go around to show you these transactions. In fact, whenever a new block is created, it also is reflected and it shows you where it was actually created. So it's a very interesting visualization of what's going on right now in the Bitcoin network all around the world. And you can see the variety of places. You can see London, you can see Honolulu, you can see here Dallas, you can see Dublin. So you can see how many different places and where Bitcoin is right now being used all around the world, and it's happening in real time. As I mentioned, this is at blocks.wizb.it. The next one is also very interesting. It's called Bitbunkers. Now this one's got sound to it. And what you hear is all the transactions that are taking place. And as you go through these transactions, you will see that they are all taking place and they are based on the size of the transaction. We have right now a new block that was created. That was block number 601,692. Let me go right now and I'm going to refresh that to see what type of visualization I can get from these. And you can see, here we go. Block 601,693 just took place. And these are the different transactions that are inside. If I click on any of them, you can actually see the details for that transaction. So let's go into one of these right here. I can see the transaction hash for it. I can see the time. I can see the various inputs and outputs for that transaction and even the transaction hash. Now, this is a very interesting specific visualization that's put together by Bill Fodel. Bill Fodel is actually a very interesting wallet. That's actually a metal wallet, and it's actually meant for you to keep your private keys safely. So if you actually have a paper wallet or you have any type of chain cold storage, Bill Fodel is a very, very valuable tool that you could look at. You can find this visualization at billfodel.com/pages/bitbunkers. I'm going to mute this right now because I want to take you to another one, which I think is actually one of my absolute favorites. This one is BitListen, and I am going to actually unmute it so you hear what we have. This is the sound of Bitcoin as new transactions are taking place all around the world. You can even choose different instruments. Let me go back to Celesta. And what's interesting about it is that all of these are real-time transactions all happening around the world. Check out this massive one that's coming in. Look at this. Look at the size of that transaction that's coming in. So that was 2,868.18 Bitcoins.
Let's talk about Bitcoin. The objective of this lesson is to show you a little bit about how you can get started with Bitcoin. I'm assuming that you don't have any experience with Bitcoin, and my point is that I want to bring you up to speed quickly on how Bitcoin works. I've also included some valuable resources as links in this lesson that you can explore if you want to learn more. So to get started with Bitcoin, the first thing you need to understand is you need to be informed. Bitcoin has some peculiar qualities about it. It behaves a lot like money, but there's some other things that are different in the way that it behaves, and you should learn about those. For example, with Bitcoin, transactions cannot be reversed, and every transaction is permanent. So that's different from actually sending money with a bank where you may issue a stop payment or issue a reversal if it's a wrong payment. Bitcoin is permanent. It's also very fast and efficient. So once you learn about Bitcoin, the first thing you need to do is install what's called a wallet. This is a type of software that you install on your mobile device or on your computer, and it enables you to get into Bitcoin and create your own addresses. An address in Bitcoin is very similar to an email address. It's what you use to receive Bitcoin. And as opposed to an email address where you have just one email address, in Bitcoin, you can have multiple addresses. And in fact, it's a good practice to have multiple addresses for different needs. You may use a Bitcoin address per every single transaction you use. You can do that with Bitcoin. Now, once you open up your wallet, you're going to receive two valuable pieces of information. One of them is what's called your public key, and another one is your private key. This is what makes Bitcoin so interesting, is that whereas with most businesses and different organizations, you need to have a password. And that password is actually a password that you share with the people that actually run the organization. So you can actually click retrieve my password and you can get it back. In Bitcoin, that's not the case. In Bitcoin, what you get are keys. There's a public key that you can share with everybody. Your private key is a key that only you know. It's an alphanumeric sequence that only you know. And it's the way that you can remain completely in control of all the funds that go into your wallet. Once you have your wallet, you can get Bitcoins. Now, there's different ways to get Bitcoins. You can earn Bitcoins by doing a job or getting paid. You can buy Bitcoins. That would mean you could go to an exchange and actually buy, put in dollars or whatever currency into Bitcoin. You can also gift Bitcoins, and you could receive them that way too. So those are ways of getting Bitcoin. And the next one is to actually spend Bitcoin. And I use the term spend freely because it's not just spending it, you can send Bitcoin. And you can use Bitcoin at over 160,000 businesses at this moment worldwide. Many of the best known brands, Microsoft, Dell, many brands take Bitcoin as payment, but you can also use Bitcoin to send payments. This works great if you're actually sending payments to people in different currencies globally. You don't have to worry about having to change into different currencies. You can just pay in Bitcoin, and it's universal around the world.
In this lesson, I want to take you through the process of choosing your wallet. In order for you to be involved in Bitcoin, you need to have a wallet. Wallet is what allows you to receive Bitcoin, send Bitcoin, store your Bitcoin. You need a wallet to do so. And in this lesson, I'm going to explain to you how to do that. And to do so, I'd like to actually take you to a page called bitcoin.org. Let me give you a little bit of background about bitcoin.org. Bitcoin.org was a site that was developed by Satoshi Nakamoto himself and another developer called Marty Malmi. Marty's nickname is Sirius, so it's Marty Malmi, also known as Sirius. Marty's no longer an active developer, but he maintains the bitcointalk.org and bitcoin.org websites. He is not involved in developing Bitcoin, and bitcoin.org is not tied into any specific core developers or anything that really just manages what Bitcoin is. Instead, it's an open source project, and it's handled by a global community. So the mission for Bitcoin.org is to grow the global impact of Bitcoin. It's run by a non-profit organization, and you can actually support it if you want by sending donations. But you can also participate in spreading the message of what Bitcoin is. I'm actually contributing by actually doing this lesson and by spreading the global impact of Bitcoin. It's part of my personal mission and something I feel very, very closely attached to. But what I want you to know about Bitcoin.org is that Bitcoin.org has a wealth of information. I want to also put into context that it's not the undisputed truth on Bitcoin.org. So there's an incredible amount of information in here, but I want you to also keep your eyes open and realize that this is not the only way of looking at the world. I am presenting you Bitcoin.org because I find that there's a lot of good information that you can use to educate yourself. But I encourage you to continue expanding your knowledge on Bitcoin and looking around and learning. But this is going to be a very, very good starting point for me to explain to you how to choose your wallet, because there's a lot of really good options here. In this page, I want to take you to a page called Choose Your Wallet. So it's bitcoin.org/en/choose your wallet. And for this lesson, what I want to explain to you is that there are different types of wallets. You have mobile wallets that you can run on any type of application, whether it's on Android, iOS, Windows, even BlackBerry's included. You have desktop wallets, so you can run it on your desktop or laptop computer for Windows, Mac, Linux. And what I'm doing this so you see how the different types of what a wealth of different options of wallets that are available. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's a very good list, and a lot of the best options are actually listed here, which is why I'm presenting you this page. There's hardware wallets. Hardware wallets are devices, and actually they cost money, but they're the most secure of all of them, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit further, where you can actually keep your private keys for your coins offline. And then there's also web wallets. So what I want you to realize is that there are multiple different wallet options that you can have, and you can install a wallet on your mobile device, you can install it on your computer, you can install a web one, but you don't necessarily have to have just one wallet. You can actually have multiple wallets, and I personally have multiple wallets for different needs. It also helps me spread the risk by not keeping all of my personal crypto in one location. It's actually across different wallets. What I want you to know is that you can go and create a wallet in any of these options that you find here, and then if you wish, you can open up another wallet elsewhere and you can send your coins to a different wallet, and you do that all the time depending on what the convenience factors that you want. What I will tell you though is that I want you to start with one wallet. Start with one wallet and don't go all in into that one wallet. What I'd like you to do is take baby steps. Step in, open up a wallet, get a small amount of Bitcoin, work with it. Interact with it, figure out how the whole process of sending and receiving is, and then start exchanging with other people and start realizing how convenient it is for you to do that. I'll tell you a perfect example. I do a lot of international business, and I constantly receive and send payments across borders all around the world. For me, it's incredibly practical for me to get paid from any place around the world via Bitcoin. Why? Because it's practically instant. The money arrives securely into my wallet, and I don't have to worry about waiting for a bank 48 hours. I don't have to worry about transfer fees. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to worry about currency exchange rates, because the matter is I'm getting paid in Bitcoin. It's one-to-one, right? So the key point is, to me, Bitcoin is incredibly practical. And in order for me to do that, I had to start with one wallet. And from there, I grew to the two wallets and moving on and on and on. As you go forth, one of the things that you may want to consider is eventually upgrading and reaching what's called a hardware wallet. Hardware wallets are great because a hardware wallet actually is a device that allows you to keep your private keys offline. So you're basically keeping in your hardware wallet your private keys, which is basically how you get to manage and send and unlock your keys so you can actually send them. The hardware wallet advantages of it are that you do what's called cold storage. When you store your coins cold, you're basically pulling them off from any device that's connected to the internet, and you're storing it separately. What that does is that it shields you away from having anybody that can hack into your system and steal your private keys, right? So you do not want to keep your coins hot. So the contrasts are, there's hot storage, which means you're keeping it on a device that's connected to the internet, or cold storage, which you're actually taking your coins and your private keys rather, and you're taking them offline where nobody can reach them. You keep control of those, and you have the liberty of putting it inside a safety deposit box if you wish, or anywhere you want. So the point I want to tell you is that hot storage is any one of these options that actually are connected to the internet, because you're able to easily access the coins, and you can do an immediate, wallet, sending coins to someone else. It's just a very convenient way to do it, but you run a risk because it's connected and somebody could hack into the system. Malware may actually do a keylogger and steal your coins. So there's risks involved in doing hot storage. Cold storage, on the other hand, allows you to pull those coins off where nobody can reach them and you can keep them wherever it is that you want. But there's also the inconvenience that you still have to go through the process of getting connected back to the internet to be able to do a transfer. So there is a delay in how you're actually being able to do that. My recommendation to you is keep a certain amount, controllable amount, on hot storage to make it convenient for you to do transactions. And when you need to do a transaction with someone, you can move coins from cold storage to hot storage and send them to other. I'm giving you a lot of information at this point. I don't want to overwhelm you. What I want to tell you, though, is that once you get your first wallet and you realize how easy it is and how practical it is to work with Bitcoin, you're going to be glued into it and you're going to want to learn more and you're going to want to expand. That's how I got started. I got my first wallet, I started receiving and sending Bitcoin, and I realized how incredibly practical it was. From there, I expanded my knowledge, and that's what you're doing right now. So what I encourage you to do is I want you to go to the specific page, the Choose Your Wallet page, and I want you to select a wallet. There are many options that you can choose from. I will tell you that most people, when they get started, the first thing they do is they get a web wallet. And the reason they do that is because it's very, very convenient, just like opening up an email account. You can go on a web you can go to a web wallet and you can actually open up your wallet, and you can even, in most of these locations that you see right here, you can actually buy Bitcoins. One key thing I want to tell you, you don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. A lot of people are afraid of getting into Bitcoin because they say, well, I have to buy a full Bitcoin and it's over $2,000. And the answer is no, you do not have to buy a full Bitcoin. You can start much less than that, but it allows you to experience Bitcoin. And then you can really start working with it and expand from that. So my recommendation to you is, I want you to go to this page and I want you to select one of the wallet options that are here. If you want to get started fast, a key one that I would recommend is try one of the web wallet options that are presented here and just open up an account and then try it. And what I want you to do is, after you finish that, I want you to write back to me and tell me what it's like. Tell me more about it. If you have any questions, like what was your experience like, I would love to hear it. And that's your mission for today. Choose your wallet, and I wish you the absolute best. Let's talk now about the topic of sending and receiving Bitcoins, because sending and receiving Bitcoins securely over the internet is what gives Bitcoin value. If it wasn't for the fact that you can have a Bitcoin and you can send it over the internet to someone else, you wouldn't really have any benefit for having your Bitcoins. So you could be sitting on all the Bitcoins in the world, but if you can't actually send them securely to someone else, then Bitcoins would be worthless. Note, what's important about Bitcoin to note is that, unlike, for example, when you're sending a photo to someone else, you have a beautiful photo and you send it to someone else digitally, you're not really sending the actual photo. What you're sending is a copy of that photo that in your computer, you're sending a copy to someone else. So you don't really send the photo. What you're sending is a copy of that photo. When it's all said and done, you may send the photo to someone else, but you still have a copy of it. That doesn't work for money, because in money, you need to have a true transfer of value. And we explained that previously. That's what makes Bitcoin so valuable. So now let's analyze exactly how that happens by studying a transaction. For this example, Alice wants to send 5 Bitcoins to Ben. She may be sending 5 Bitcoins because she may have bought a product or she's paying him for services. There's many reasons why Alice may want to send 5 Bitcoins to Ben. In order for Alice to be able to send those 5 Bitcoins, she needs to have 5 Bitcoins. And in order for her to have her 5 Bitcoins, she needs to have a wallet. And in that wallet, she needs to have received Bitcoins. Now, she could have bought Bitcoins or she could have received Bitcoins as payment. There's many ways that she could have gotten access to those Bitcoins. For this example, we are assuming that Alice has 20 Bitcoins in her wallet. Additionally, we know that Alice has the private key to her wallet. Because she knows the private key, she's able to spend those Bitcoins. As we explained, when you get your wallet assigns you a public key, which is how you receive Bitcoins, and you have a private key, which is what allows you to sign and authorize spending or sending those Bitcoins to other people. So in this specific case, Alice has a wallet and she has 20 Bitcoins, and she also has the private key, which will enable her to send those 5 Bitcoins. So we're here. And now Alice needs to send 5 Bitcoins to Ben. Well, how can Ben receive 5 Bitcoins? In order for Ben to receive 5 Bitcoins, he needs to have a wallet of his own. And for this specific case, Ben has a wallet, and he actually happens to have 10 Bitcoins. Now, he could have gotten 10 Bitcoins from anyone else, just like for Alice, he may have bought them at an exchange or received them as payment from someone else. But it so happens that Ben has a wallet, and in that wallet, he currently has 10 Bitcoins. Note, Ben has a private key for his wallet that will enable him to spend those 10 Bitcoins that he has in his wallet. That private key is completely different from Alice's private key. Alice has her own private key. In both cases, Ben keeps his private key secret, Alice keeps her private key secret. Now what's going to happen is Ben, in order to receive those 5 Bitcoins from Alice, needs to provide her with his Bitcoin address. He can share his Bitcoin address with whoever he wants. That Bitcoin address is simply for receiving money. Interesting thing to note, your Bitcoin address is actually a hashed version of your public key. Ben has a public key that was assigned to him when he opened up his wallet. It was generated for him, actually. He was generated a public key and a private key. But in this specific case, Ben never shares his public key. What he shares is his Bitcoin address to receive Bitcoins. And he probably will never look at his public key. He just cares about the Bitcoin addresses which are generated by his wallet. Ben has the option to generate a new Bitcoin address for every single transaction if he wants. That's actually a good security recommendation in terms of privacy. Not that you have to worry when you share a Bitcoin address with someone else because they may be able to, break the code and take your coins. That's impossible. The only way that anybody could spend the coins inside your wallet, which were assigned to that Bitcoin address, would be if they knew your private key. If they didn't have your private key, it's impossible. So you can feel free to share that Bitcoin address with as many people as you want. The only reason why it's important sometimes to generate new Bitcoin addresses is that every single transaction on the blockchain is actually public. So if you use the same Bitcoin address multiple times, you can actually see a pattern, and you can see a lot of payments being sent to a specific Bitcoin address, and you lose the privacy of that. So if a lot of people are starting to see that there's a lot of different transactions sent to that one Bitcoin address, you lose the fact because people could be tracking to see how much Bitcoin you are actually receiving. So it's a good rule of thumb when you're actually looking for privacy to generate a new Bitcoin address for every single transaction. For this specific example, Ben has generated a Bitcoin address and shares it with Alice. Notice, when he shares his Bitcoin address, there's two things that you can actually share. You can share an alphanumeric code, which you see on the top. It starts with a number 1 and ends in the letter H. And that alphanumeric code will be completely different for every single Bitcoin address. Bitcoin addresses are typically between 26 to 35 characters in length, and they always begin with a number, either a number 1 or a number 3, as the protocol stands now. So that Bitcoin address that you see alphanumerically is how Ben tells Alice where he can receive Bitcoins from her. He also has the option to share the QR code that you see at the bottom. If you actually take your Bitcoin wallet and you actually take a snapshot of that QR code, you will see that it will resolve the same Bitcoin address that you see on the top. That's the way that you can share your Bitcoin address with someone. And again, Ben can share that with anybody that he wants because it's how he receives Bitcoins. So he has shared his Bitcoin address with Alice. Now Alice needs to send the 5 Bitcoins to that address. So she creates a transaction. She's able to do that because in her wallet she has access to the private key and can authorize the 5 Bitcoins to be transferred over to Ben's Bitcoin address. So a new transaction is created which shows that from Alice's wallet, 5 Bitcoins are actually being sent to the Bitcoin address that corresponds to Ben. The transaction at that point gets sent out into the network, and the miners begin mining blocks. When the first block comes in and actually includes that transaction in it, the transaction is set to be confirmed. Now, at that point, Alice will have 5 Bitcoins less assigned to her in her wallet, and Ben will have 5 more Bitcoins assigned to him in his wallet. And that's because there is a transaction that reported that Alice transferred the rights to 5 Bitcoins over to Ben. Alice will be free to spend the 15 Bitcoins that remain in her wallet, and Ben will be free to spend the 15 Bitcoins he now has in his wallet. And they can do that because each one of them will have a private key corresponding to their own Bitcoin wallet.
In this lesson, we will go over different ways that you can keep your Bitcoins safe. The reason I'm bringing this up is that by now, you know what a Bitcoin wallet is, you know that you need it to get your Bitcoins. You might have already looked at ways of getting your own Bitcoins. Well, once you get your Bitcoins, you gotta make sure that you store them safely, and that's what we're gonna cover in this lesson. For starters, let's talk about the fact that Bitcoin is very, very practical, and you can send Bitcoin from your mobile device or any device to anybody else around the world. It's a very easy way to send money effectively using Bitcoin. Well, hackers know that. And because of that, people who have Bitcoins are actually likely targets that hackers go after. They're trying to install malware or keyloggers or any type of different virus software in your computers to be able to get access to those Bitcoins. You may have heard about ransomware. And then there's also these keyloggers which actually track the different keystrokes that you have. The objective is to get access to your private keys. If they get access to your private keys, they can steal your Bitcoins. So what we're going to talk about is how you make sure that that doesn't happen. The first one is make sure that any device where you actually keep your Bitcoins, your digital wallets, is clean and virus-free. What you need to do is you need to do regular antivirus and anti-malware scans on these devices to make sure that there's nothing in them whenever you install these digital wallets on them. The reason is because if there's any malware in there, the hackers will get access to your private keys and you would be able to lose your Bitcoins because they can extract them. And like we may have mentioned, in Bitcoin, transactions are non-reversible. So once they take your Bitcoins, there's no way for you to get those Bitcoins back. So make sure always that the devices that you actually perform your Bitcoins transactions in are clean. Additionally, make sure that you keep firewalls and that you do not use these public access Wi-Fis without using a VPN at least to make sure that nobody can see your different transactions when you're actually doing transactions in Bitcoin. Furthermore, this is what's known as hot storage. Hot storage is whenever you're talking about keeping your Bitcoins on a device that's connected to the internet. That's hot storage. It's very practical. It's very easy for you to walk into a store that accepts Bitcoin, simply pull out your mobile device and pay for something using your phone. It's fantastic. You can also send Bitcoin practically instantly from your computer to anybody in the planet because that's what Bitcoin allows you to do. But the hackers know that. Instead, what you want to do is you want to keep only a small amount in hot storage. There is vulnerability to keeping it in hot storage, but you don't expose yourself fully to it. What you do is you keep the brunt of your Bitcoins in what's known as cold storage. Cold storage is when you take out your Bitcoin private keys from whatever device that's connected to the internet and put them offline in some other format. Let me give you some examples of these. The first one I want to tell you about is what's known as a brain wallet. Let me show you an example. This right here is what's a brain wallet. I actually generated this on this link right here, and I've provided you several links for cold storage options along with this lesson. And what this is actually a Bitcoin wallet that has a Bitcoin address and has a private key that allows me to access whatever funds are put into this Bitcoin address. And I generated this by using a passphrase that I came up with. What I did was I came up with a long passphrase and I inserted it inside this link. And instead, it gave me this brain wallet, which had the Bitcoin address and the private key. Now, I could load whatever amount of Bitcoin I want into this Bitcoin address, and then in the future, I can take that Bitcoin and pull it out of this brain wallet into another wallet by doing something known as sweep. You can either sweep these Bitcoins or you can import these keys into the actual wallet. Good options are Electrum provides you for sweeping keys into it, and you're able to get your Bitcoins again. And all you really need is this private key right here. Now, the advantages of having a brain wallet is that once you load your Bitcoins in here, and by the way, there's no funds in here. I've actually just created this for the purposes of this lesson, and please do not send funds in here. You can just retrieve all of them by using this private key. But once you know your passphrase, you don't need the paper because you can always generate another paper by using the same exact passphrase. You keep it in your mind. There's your brain wallet. Now, if you don't trust your brain that much, you can create what's known as a paper wallet, which is similar. Let me show you what I mean. This is a paper wallet. Now, a paper wallet can be generated from a random number that the paper wallet generator creates. So you don't have to come up with your own passphrase. You can add some passphrase elements to it to make it even more random. But the truth is you can create just a random Bitcoin address and a random private key that enables you to access those funds. As a result, you can load Bitcoins into this paper wallet, and then you can retrieve them using this private key. Now, there are other options for paper wallets, such as these. These are really pretty. And actually, there's other options that actually have paper wallets for different occasions, for different holidays, say Christmas, Hanukkah. And
you can create paper wallets for all these. Paper wallets are a great option for storing your Bitcoins offline where hackers cannot reach them. But you're vulnerable because if a paper wallet gets wet, or you break it, or you lose it, you lose your Bitcoins. You won't be able to retrieve them. Another alternative is to use a USB drive. Now, you can take your private keys from your computer and actually pull them out of this USB drive, and there are ways for you to do that. Advantages: they're no longer in your computer, and since they're here, hackers can't get to it. Disadvantages: you could lose the USB drive, or the USB drive could stop working, in which case you lose your Bitcoins. So there is that vulnerability. An alternative to this is to actually use what's known as a hardware wallet. And this is an option of them. This is actually a Trezor. There's other ones. There's Ledger. There's KeepKey. And hardware wallets have advantages over the USB drives. Among them is the fact that you can actually generate a seed that goes along with the hardware wallet, that if you ever lose the wallet or it breaks or somebody steals it, you can always recreate all the keys and retrieve all your Bitcoins if you have that seed. So it's very important that whenever you get a hardware wallet, you get the seed that corresponds to it and keep that in case you ever lose the hardware wallet or it stops working. This is a great option, and I highly encourage you, if you're storing Bitcoin, to keep a hardware wallet if possible. So one of the key things that I want to position out of all this is that at the end of the day, the important thing of all of these options is to make sure that nobody gets access to your private keys. Key thing is this: if someone gets access to your private keys, they could potentially take your Bitcoins away. So the different options are to keep them in hot storage, like we said, on a computer, on a mobile device, etc., connected to the web. But there's vulnerabilities to that. And then there's cold storage, where you can actually pull your private keys out where hackers cannot reach it. Multiple options with cold storage. You want to make sure that you choose the one that makes the most sense to you, and always keep backups of these. Because if at some point you were to lose that piece of paper, or you lose that USB drive, or you lose anything except perhaps the hardware wallet, which you can retrieve with your seed, you would lose access to your Bitcoins. So I hope you use these, now that you know how to use Bitcoin, to protect yourself and keep your Bitcoins safe. I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.
In this lesson, I will be covering easy ways that you can convert your Bitcoins into local fiat currency. That is, if you have Bitcoins and you want to convert them to, say, US dollars or euros or yen, you need to be able to do so because not everybody currently accepts Bitcoin for payment. So sometimes you do need to switch your Bitcoins to local currency. The following are very easy options for you to do so. The first one is to use a cryptocurrency exchange. You see, just like with regular currency, whenever you go on a business trip or you go to another place, the first thing you need to do is that sometimes they don't take your local currency. So you're going to have to go to an exchange to actually switch your local currency for the currency of that country you're visiting. With Bitcoin, it's the same thing. And there are cryptocurrency exchanges that actually specialize in converting your cryptocurrency, in this case Bitcoin, into your local currency, say US dollars, euros, or yen. There are many options to do so, and they're very easy to use. Some of them, for example, are Coinbase. Coinbase is a very easy alternative. It is available in over 30 different countries, and they will easily be able to convert your Bitcoins into currency and deposit it directly into your bank account. There are other alternatives. For instance, Kraken is another alternative. Gemini is another alternative. Bitstamp is another alternative. And there's a wide range of other cryptocurrency exchanges. I cover it more in depth in the Cryptocurrency Fundamentals course. However, for the purposes of this lesson, I'd like to encourage you to check out the options that I provided for you. Another very good alternative to convert your Bitcoin to fiat currency is to use a debit card, a Bitcoin debit card. You see, there are debit cards that focus on converting Bitcoin to traditional fiat currency. And there are multiple options for this. For instance, Coinbase offers a Visa Bitcoin debit card, which enables you to keep your holdings in Bitcoin, and you can actually be paying anywhere that accepts Visa using your Bitcoin debit card. So you can go to a restaurant and you can pay with Visa, and you're in fact paying in Bitcoin. But to the restaurant, you're paying in the local currency. The Visa debit card enables you to do that conversion on the fly. Additionally, you can go to an ATM and you can actually withdraw funds in your local fiat currency against your Bitcoin holdings. Now, the Coinbase Bitcoin Visa debit card is not the only option out there, and there are multiple other ones. For example, Bitwala also offers a Visa Bitcoin debit card. Additionally, there are other debit cards for cryptocurrency that go above and beyond merely Bitcoin. The next option that I would like to encourage you to take on is to simply sell your Bitcoins to someone else. As we've learned in this course, you can transfer Bitcoin directly to another person without involving the services of a third party, such as a bank or a credit card. So why not sell your Bitcoins? What you simply need to do is find out somebody that wants to buy your Bitcoins, and you can process a transfer directly into their wallet and transfer your Bitcoins. And you can get paid for that. Now notice something. In this type of transfer, there is some security risks involved. And that is because when you do a transfer of Bitcoin to someone else, that transaction is irreversible. So if you actually send your Bitcoins to someone else and that person does not pay you for the Bitcoins, you have no way to retrieve your Bitcoins back. So whenever you're actually doing a sale of Bitcoins to someone else, whether it's a family member, a friend, or someone that you might have met at a local Bitcoin meetup, make sure you trust this person and that you find a way that you can make sure that you're going to get paid for the Bitcoins that you send. An alternative to that is to actually use what's known as a local trading site. And these are sites that are designed specifically for trading Bitcoins. For example, one of them is localbitcoins.com, and it is available in over 200 countries. And these are a site where you can actually place your Bitcoins for sale on the platform, and they provide an escrow service. What it allows you to do is to simply lock your Bitcoins inside the escrow platform, and the buyer will be able to pay you for those Bitcoins. The platform will take care of releasing the Bitcoins upon successful payment. And in that way, both parties, both the buyer and the seller, get what they are delivered. The Bitcoin goes to the buyer and the buyer actually pays to the seller. So localbitcoins.com is a very good option for you to be able to sell your Bitcoins to other people. Another option is to use what's known as a Bitcoin ATM. You see, there are ATMs also known as BTMs or Bitcoin teller machines. And these are teller machines where you can actually buy Bitcoins or you can even sell your Bitcoins. And the transaction process is very easy and it's conducted directly from your Bitcoin wallet, where you can do a transaction with the ATM or BTM in this case and actually send your Bitcoins, and you will actually get back your cash in the local currency. These are good options for you to be able to transfer and convert your Bitcoins into local currency. I hope you find them valuable, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Hey, it's George Levy. Congratulations on completing Blockchain and Bitcoin Fundamentals. I hope you found the course valuable and that you learned in the process. Very soon you're going to finish the course, which means that you're going to be able to get your certificate of completion so you can show everybody that you successfully completed Blockchain and Bitcoin Fundamentals. We've covered a lot of ground in this course, and I hope you realize that by this point, you already know what is blockchain, you know what is Bitcoin, you understand all the key concepts involved, you understand some major common misconceptions about blockchain and Bitcoin, and very importantly, you understand that Bitcoin is only one application of blockchain technology. There's a lot more that we can accomplish. The fact is, we're changing the world one blockchain at a time. And if we use this technology properly, we're bound to make the world a better place for everyone. You are a blockchain visionary, and at this point, you've gathered a lot of information that you can use to your advantage. I hope you'll take this opportunity to not stop here and go above and beyond and achieve ever greater levels of success for yourself and much better impact on the planet. To that end, and to help you along, I've created additional courses, but I also publish a lot of free information which you can take advantage of. Simply follow me on social media at twitter.com/GeorgeLevy, facebook.com/GeorgeLevyBlockchain, and my YouTube channel is youtube.com/GeorgeLevy, where I publish brand new videos every single week. Always, if you ever want to get in touch with me, simply visit me at georgelevy.com. I'm here for you, and I hope to see you ever growing in your path to achieving ever greater levels of success. Thank you for the opportunity of being your instructor. I'm George Levy, and I wish you the very best.